Kurt Metzger said you're fun. So that's a high bar right there.
Yeah, I know. It's a little, I don't know why he thought that, but I'll try not to disappoint. I was just telling Julian before I showed up that I was like this close to getting some White Claws to kind of bring to the episode, but I didn't have enough time, and the place I was in, I don't know if I wanted to be walking around with White Claws. it might encourage predators. If you know what I mean.
Maybe you got to watch the neighborhoods. But I actually, when I went to do the Discovery Channel thing, they had me cut together like a fake reel where they're like, "Hey, can we just give you a quick script and you film it and you act like you're on camera?" And Deef and I were like, "Okay, fine." So we just filmed him with Kurt Metzger. We just finished filming with him. And so I took the laptop right here and I let it. It was like 4 lines. So I read it line by line. And then afterwards I was like, well, fuck, I got to put a guest in there. So I went and found footage of Kurt like ripping White Claws and playing with the
It ended up in the
Not only did it end, I'm like, I finished editing it real quick and I'm like, this is hilarious. They're never going to accept this. I sent it to the EP at fucking Discovery and he's like, awesome. I'm like, oh my God. And then the director like insisted on leaving it in. So he's like a co-star of that show with the White Claws. You got to love it.
He needs to get like an endorsement, like
something.
Contract or something.
Yeah, pull that mic in a little bit, by the way. But yeah.
All right, that better?
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
He needs an endorsement from White Claw.
He absolutely does.
Yeah.
He's like peddling it and he's not getting any love for it. He's getting love for it, but he's not getting any money for it.
He's not getting money for it.
We're in New Jersey right now. You gotta have the money.
You gotta have the moolah, baby.
That's right.
But how did he even find you?
This is bizarre. So again, I have a relatively small channel. It's called Through a Glass Darkly. Right?
Link down below.
Yep. And there's a episode I talked to a lot of remote viewers, like actual, not like like my dog scratching his left nutsack, and I see visions of ghosts. No, it's actually the people who were trained in the military protocol that went all the way back to Ingo Swann back
like
in
Stargate.
the 70s. Yeah, Stargate program.
Yeah.
Well, Grill Flames, Center Lane, it went by various names. But I talked to a lot of those guys, like David Morehouse, Paul Smith, Lynn Buchanan, and I was interviewing Lynn Buchanan, and he had a story about an abduction that he had. And it came back as kind of a strange memory. He was kind of going out, getting in his car, and he'd always be paranoid about forgetting something. And he always it was absurd. And he kind of sits in his car and his wife's like, well, she's used to it. And she's like, oh, you forget something again? The car keys? And suddenly he had this memory that kind of came back, this hidden memory of this abduction experience. Anyway, I can talk about that later, but
you can talk about it now. We got all day, man.
Yeah. So this is actually wasn't recounted for the first time on my podcast. It's actually in a book called Alien Agenda by Jim Marrs, and it's actually recounted in there. And I didn't even know that. I had the book on my shelf from like decades earlier, and I found it in there. I'm like, holy crap, it's in the book.
Hey guys, 3 quick things. Number 1, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It's a huge, huge help. Number 2, if you'd like to join my Patreon for early uncensored releases of the full episodes, you can join via the link in my description or in the pinned comment below. And number 3, if you'd like to join my clipping community for a chance to make content from the show and make money, you can join via the Discord link in my description below.
But anyway, Lynn tells this story where he wakes up on he's seated with all these people and everybody around him is kind of in a daze. And there's like this tall, for lack of a better word, tall white, but this like really like stacked, built, call it for lack of a better word, non-human intelligence, right? Like big black eyes, white skin, etc. And he's still kind of semi in a daze, and he kind of looks over at this being and says something to the effect of, he thinks he's on like an airliner, and he's just like, hey, can I get a window seat? And this thing looks at him like a lion was just let loose, kind of runs out of the room, comes back, and there's this, small gray, right, that tries to basically say everything's all right and hypnotize him. And he finally realizes he's in this like weird situation where it's kind of an abduction. So the being kind of shows him how to fly the craft. It has one of these hand devices that you've seen in is purported to have been in the Roswell crash, either the Roswell crash or like something that Bob Lazar has described. Mm-hmm. And shows them how to basically fly this thing. So they eventually land on some place where there's black grass. It's like a twilight area. And this gray is just like, why don't you stay with me? And would you like to consider being a pilot? And the guy's like, Lynn Buchanan is like, yeah, it'd be fantastic. He's like, well, you'll never be able to return to your family. Meanwhile, and this is one of those stories that's so weird that all the rest of the people, they funnel into this building on this hill. And he hears he'd hear like a blood-curdling scream, and then a chorus of laughter, and then there would be another blood-curdling scream, and then another chorus of laughter. And he asked the gray, like, what the hell's going on over there? He's just like, don't worry about it. It's not. Anyway.
And they're talking. It's not telepathic.
No, I think it's telepathic.
It's telepathic.
It's definitely telepathic. Okay. So this is a story in a particular podcast, and that's how Kurt found me. He's just like, he couldn't.
Yeah, checks out.
But here's the thing, like, Lynn Buchanan didn't believe it because he had kind of faint memories of it. So then he had his team at Fort Meade remote view it. Now, for people who don't know anything about remote viewing, the protocol is you get eight characters, right? So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It used to be geospatial coordinates, but that would ruin the experience because when you're dealing with military officers and personnel, right, they'll start to see 8-digit coordinates and they'll be able to figure out roughly where in the world they would be looking at, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it would so the way that this has to work, or ideally it works, is through a double-blind protocol, okay? And the way it works is you're given kind of just 8 random characters, and it corresponds to a target, okay? Now the target is just someplace in space and time. Could be the past, could be the future, could be anything. Typically, it's an intelligence, or it was designed as an intelligence collection method, right? And so it was scientifically verified. It was produced in Stanford Research Institute, SRI, Stanford Research Institute, designed by, they were kind of working with this guy, Ingo Swann, who was a gifted natural psychic. But anyway, I'll get back to that. But the way this works is that's all you get. You just get 8 characters. And it's like, for people who are software engineers, it's like a pointer. It's like a pointer in memory someplace, but it's just to a place in space and time. The reason they do that is you don't want to pollute the data that you would get from the target. So, and it's something they call front loading. And that's and there are examples of front loading where remote viewing has gone horribly awry, right? That's the whole Heaven's Gate situation, but we can talk about that one later too. So you don't want to have front loading. You just want to open that aperture perception and see what comes in. You don't want to be polluted, right? Otherwise, if I tell you, hey, I'm looking for a missile base in Russia, near Semipalatinsk or whatever, you're going to start seeing missiles. You're going to start making up shit, right?
So it needs to be like tabula rasa in a way. Like
double blind protocol. Sometimes it can be single blind, but even then, there are some people who claim to know how this works, but the CIA, DIA were never able to figure out how it works, and that was part of the reason they, quote unquote, canceled the program. The program's still definitely going on. But I think Dean Radin, who was associated with that, Dr. Dean Radin, if you haven't talked to him, you definitely need to talk to him.
I know that name. I think Danny Jones.
Danny Jones, definitely talked to him.
Yeah.
But he used to work at Bell Labs, and he was also affiliated with the program way back when. And he's done an immense amount of research on psi, magic, like MAGICK, all that stuff, and has demonstrated that psi works to, odds against chance in some cases in the numbers that over like quadrillion, let's say, right? Like well over 1 in quadrillion odds against chance of this thing, of certain things happening just randomly. But in terms of this intelligence technique. It's just in order to kind of focus the mind, and you slowly open that aperture of perception. So you typically start with just classifying, is it a man-made object? Is it is it land? Is it water? Is it a life form, et cetera? And you slowly, methodically open that aperture of perception through, depending on the technique you use, because there's various techniques. Once they broke from Stargate, a lot of these viewers kind of put their own little stamp on it.
Okay.
But you gradually open that aperture of perception so that by the time you're in stage 6, right? Back in the day, they would build like full-scale clay models and things like that. I haven't seen anybody doing that today. But it's a real capability.
All right. I was holding in a question there just so I can fully understand this. When it makes sense at the beginning where you're explaining they open up the aperture and they start with however they're doing it, if they're sitting in a room, sitting like this, or just staring at the wall. I'm not sure. Maybe it's different for different remote viewers, but they come up with the thing, like the base case of it. And then is someone like asking them more questions about what they see so they can start to whittle it down to, I think you described it in stages, like stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
Yeah, so sometimes. So there's monitored viewing where you have a monitor that will kind of probe you and ask questions on certain things that you're reporting.
Like a person's doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, ideally, you want that person also to be blind. Otherwise, they're going to be kind of foisting the...
Right.
And the other thing is, this is what I was trying to get at, and I got distracted. They're also trying to, because they don't know how it works, right? Some people claim to know how it works, but, in any of this stuff, it's difficult to really tell. The reason you don't want the monitor to have it in his head, because it might be something they call a telepathic overlay, right? So you might be just pulling it out of their head.
Couple years ago when we went to do one of our first merch drops, Alessi put everything on Shopify. And I was unfamiliar with the platform at the time, but it made the process so easy for us to interact with customers and be able to get them the merchandise on time. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Skims and Chubbies to brands just getting started. If you're thinking about setting up a Shopify account for yourself, it's easy to set up your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand style. You can accelerate your efficiency, whether you're uploading new products or trying to improve existing ones. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. So it's time to turn those what-ifs into... with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/Julian. That link is in my description below. That's shopify.com/Julian.
For all you know. And there's also a debate on whether or not you're pulling it out from the future, right? From you being in the future. So as an example, let's say you remote view an event and then it happens. Your remote viewing might not necessarily be at the actual event. It could be that you're remote viewing your own future and you see the newspaper article that you saw. So there's a debate on that. So people like Eric Wargo, who's focused on time and how it works, will tell you that you're basically just looking ahead to your own future and seeing this, and that's why feedback is important. But there are others who will tell you, no, you're actually going to that event in space and time, and that's why, I mean, like your consciousness, not you actually. That's why people have things like effects like bilocation. Now, bilocation in the grander psi area typically means that you're in two places at once. Like there's saints that have been reported like that, like Padre Pio, Teresa, I think it's Teresa of Avila, stuff like that.
Sounds familiar.
In remote viewing, bilocation just means that you're experiencing physiologically the effects of something you're looking at. So, and it can be dangerous. So if you're looking at like a fire, a forest fire, some remote viewers will start sweating, like their heart will start palpitating. They'll feel intense discomfort because they're getting a little bit too close. Because you're not just seeing this stuff in your mind, you're actually feeling it, touching it. you're feeling like impressions of where it's supposed to go.
Is that why Padre Pio was reported to have like the stigmata?
I don't know.
Was that from that?
I don't know if he was. I mean, he wouldn't have
Can we
been.
check that, Deef? Maybe I'm mixing him up with someone.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been trained in the protocol. That's the other thing that's important to note. Remote viewing is a very narrowly defined aspect of psi, right? And what you see is people are flooding the zone with, "Oh, I'm a remote viewer because I, scratch my dog's nutsack, and he vomits, like pebbles, and I count the pebbles." And think of it as like a form of when you're talking about psi and magic, for the instance, it's kind of roughly interchangeable. There's
How so?
Because what you're doing is you're influencing. Well, I'm trying to find a way to generalize it. Aspects of either seeing or controlling reality, right?
Okay.
So Dean Radin has a book. I think it's Magic or something like that. But there's kind of three different forms. There's divination, right? There's enchantment, and then there's theurgy. So divination is something like remote viewing would be a subset of divination. Now, there are people out there who are naturally gifted psychics who claim to be remote viewing. They're not remote viewing, but they are demonstrating some aspect of clairvoyance. It's just different. So you have to be careful about.
And how do we really define that then? Because again, when I've talked with different people about remote viewing, to my dumbass, some of it feels like it's on a spectrum, if you will. And you were saying, at least earlier in my defense, that it's done differently by some different people in different ways. So how do they box it and say, all right, that's something psychic, that's remote viewing?
If they don't start with a number, right? Or not a number, but like a number, like a string of 8 number digits characters, okay? And they don't know what they're and they know what they're targeting. I mean, I have to be careful with this too, because there are some instances where people know that they're looking for a missing person. So I don't want to be too doctrinal, but you can't just say, "Hey, I want you to remote view, this alien species that I saw at the back of the comet," right? Because you're gonna. That's basically what happened with this Heaven's Gate situation, right? Where someone was set up by someone from the original program. Anyway, there's.
Yeah, I will come back to the Heaven's Gate thing.
Yeah, so if they don't start with that, it's probably not remote viewing. And there's kind of 2 broad categories. There's what you would call CRV, which is coordinate remote viewing or controlled remote viewing. That's where you kind of start with the number and target. And then there's something called, and that's where you sit, in the alpha wave brain state, and you're just kind of you're detecting, decoding, and observing various targets. Then there's something called extended remote viewing, where you probably get a little bit closer down to theta, and it's more of a free form. You're just you're kind of laying down, you're very relaxed, and you're trying to see certain things. So that's, and then I would also say if they were trained by someone from the original program, it's probably remote viewing. Okay. But if they're I'm a Sicilian mystic,
Right.
from whatever, they might actually be accurate, and they might be, doing some form of divination, right? They could be throwing chicken bones and what's the I Ching, something like that.
I mean, you're outside of my pay grade now.
So that's like a Chinese form of divination, and Philip K. Dick.
Love Philip K. Dick.
Well, here's a story. So there's another author that I've spoken to in the past who knew Philip K. Dick, because he's a author. I know the name's escaping me for right now. Tim Powers. So he wrote the Pirates of the Caribbean. That was, I think, based on one of his
Really?
on Stranger Tides, that specific. Yeah.
Wow.
So Tim
That's
Powers.
That's a flex.
Well, I mean, anyway, he knew Philip K. Dick, and he said that Philip K. Dick would routinely use the I Ching, and he would get answers that he didn't like. So whenever he got an answer he didn't like, he would literally make the I Ching I think it's if it's like a board or it's not cards, but it's, some contraption. He would make it sleep outside. Oh. I mean, he's a crazy guy.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. And he also attracted like really crazy, he was like into really crazy women for some reason.
They usually are in that kind of situation for sure. They can't live with us here on Earth.
But that is another method of divination that some people swear by, right? Tarot might be something else. I don't know. I, don't have any experience with it.
Oh, like the cards?
Yeah.
All that? Yeah, trying to tap into the other side.
Astrology also would be another form of divination. So those are the kind of the categories.
Don't tell the coffee shops in New York that. Shit. They know already, boy.
So that's divination, right? Then you have enchantment, right? And that's like casting spells on people and weird stuff like that you would do in ceremonial magic, witchcraft. And then there's theurgy. Theurgy is just invoking the help of an entity, right? Mm-hmm. So like prayer would be something like that. And according to Dean Radin, there are empirical effects from prayer that are indistinguishable from spells, apparently. He's like, they're the same thing.
How does he explain that?
I haven't gone into it. But if you look at, and in fact, this gentleman actually just passed. So he was I've done 3 interviews of people that did not want to be seen, right? Just their voices. So, like it or not, like AI allows you to create like a little character that you can sync their voice to and whatnot to make it a little bit more entertaining.
Do you change their voice too? Make it like, no. Oh, you keep it the same?
I keep the voice the same. I just change the character instead of, and there's like a program that'll lip sync and all that stuff. And you can create basically whatever you want. So this gentleman, his name was Pete Carroll. He was one of the, if not the creator of a system of magic called chaos magic, which now I'm sounding like absolutely crazy. I'll just explain kind of. I'm just saying
You're
it's
just
out
reporting.
There. I'm just reporting. Okay?
I understand that.
But the way that he explains it, though, is actually remarkably consistent with how quantum mechanics works, right? So you're familiar. You probably heard this a million times with the double slit experiment, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't observe the electron or the subatomic particle going through, you get a probability distribution of every possible way that they could go through that slit, right? But if you observe it, you just get one thing against the screen, like that deterministic thing. So all chaos magic basically said is because Peter, and by the way, he just passed, I think, on April 22nd, and I was supposed to interview him on May 4th, which is, super unfortunate. But he developed a system, and the way that he said the system works is if you think of just simple probabilities, right? So the probability of any one event is P. The probability of that event not occurring is 1 minus P, right? Mm-hmm. Because the total 100%, you cover everything, okay? So the way that, he theorized magic works, and again, it's just, a bored chemistry student at the time that was coming up with this stuff, is that there was kind of like a coefficient before that 1 minus P. So if you, let's say you wanted to become like an NBA star tomorrow and you perform some sort of magical ritual, right? The probability of becoming an NBA star is extremely, extremely small. The probability of not becoming an NBA star is extremely large, right? 1 minus P.
But you're saying there's a chance.
Well, that's what that magical factor is. But the multiple on that thing would have to be, enormous to overcome what that probability is of, so it's very unlikely no matter what you do. So it works for small things. There's also according to Peter Carroll, there are also certain other things that are related to it, like it operates on the subconscious. So this is this whole sigilization thing, right? So you typically put what you desire onto and I think Dr. Heather Lynn talks a lot about this. In fact, she was being interviewed by one of the hosts on Coast to Coast AM, not, Richard Styrett, I think. but it wasn't for Coast to Coast. It was just for his own podcast. And she was going into the detail on how you would create a sigil and kind of invoke it and stuff. And during that, she had this like painting of Pazuzu behind her, which is basically a ancient Sumerian demon. And as she was going through this, the thing crashed and the thing just cut out. So she got back on, and it was just weird stuff. But the point of this sigilization is, if it's in your conscious desire, it's less likely to happen. But if you are able to kind of invoke what that desire is into some sigil that 2 days later you're not even going to remember what it is, it operates on your subconscious to manifest it. Again, in theory, haven't tried it, don't know if it works.
Yeah, I'm going to sit here and try to manifest a fucking 16-inch dick at this rate. Holy shit. I don't know, like, whenever you get into this space, there's always going to be a ton of bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be things where it's like some people are just making a living off of writing books, claiming you can do all this stuff that people actually can't do. And then sometimes if it's lighter, think of just people who are like pure manifestation. Like, if I just say the words, it'll happen, which technically isn't true. It can have some sort of placebo effect to where things do happen because, by the way, there is absolutely true science to something like positive affirmations and things like that, which are a piece of manifestation. But what's always fascinated me about the remote viewing is the fact that the government and the deep bureaucracies and the spy people have used this, and at least at one point publicly sworn by it. Like you said, they claim to have ended Project Stargate. That's total bullshit. Obviously, they're still doing something like this. But the fact that decades ago, they founded a program on the basis of some people having some weird, very cool thing going on in their brain to where they could actually be able to see things to forecast around the world for measures of national security. And then the fact that they use that and also seem to have, and I believe this, gotten at least some results from it, should be mind-numbing to everybody. Like, that's crazy to me.
Well, when it came out, there was a book that came out called Psychic Warrior. It was by David Morehouse. That's how I found out about it. I think I read it in 2018. And he was the first one I interviewed because he had a background similar in the military that I did. His was much more impressive. But we were both combat arms officers. I was a cavalry officer and he was an infantry officer. But he was good enough to command a ranger company, which is very few people in the Army are kind of given that honor. And he was running a training exercise in Jordan in this place called Batn al-Ghuld, which is kind of this, allegedly, according to the Jordanians, it's like a haunted valley. It's Valley of the Jinn, whatever. And as he was staying there with his soldiers at night, like all the Jordanian soldiers would be like randomly screaming and things like that because they believed entities kind of roamed the area. Anyway, while he was in that valley, they were running just a field training exercise, live fire exercise. And he got shot in the head with a machine gun by one of the Jordanians. Now, it hit the Kevlar and bounced off it and stuff like that, but he had kind of one of those hematomas and was basically ejected out of his body and had a number of experiences. Now,
ejected out of his body?
In terms of like his consciousness, essence, he said he reported it as if it was like a frequency on a radio station dial was turned and he was in like another frequency.
Whoa.
And he had, some like older gentleman, it could have been his higher self, it could have been, he didn't know, but basically said, you're on the wrong path. You're supposed to be on the path of peace, this and yada, 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 something like that. So he obviously, if you have an injury like that and you report it, or you report that you're, had some out-of-body experience in the Ranger Regiment, you're gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least back then, I don't know about now, but back then it's just like you got to be deployable 100% of the time or you're gone. So he kind of held on to it. And I think in his next assignment, at that time in his career, like every Army officer wants to avoid recruiting duty. It's just like the absolute worst. So he somehow finagled an intelligence posting working in DIA. So one of the scientists at DIA, or actually they have these psychologists, I think he was working on some program and this guy he would ask him things in really guilt-inducing ways. And he's just like, oh, so have you had any strange experiences? You know? Or you would say, okay, anything you want to, he would say like, anything you want to tell me? Right? And just kind of look at him. And he's like, all right, fuck it. So he just tells the story. And the psychologist says, I might have something for you. So he pulls out all these files of all the previous remote viewing exercises that these people in Stargate looked at, and basically just kind of gave the file to him and said, hey, why don't you just read these over the next few days and get back to me and tell me if it's something you're interested in. So what he was reading was during the Iranian hostage crisis, the remote viewers have the difficulty with that is there weren't any plans of the U.S. consulate or embassy, I think it was embassy, in the United States, right? There may have been plans and stuff like that there, right, on site, but it was obviously the Iranians were in control. So they didn't have a map of the place, and obviously they want to, this is like the Desert One fiasco where they want to get Delta in there to rescue the hostages. So they only had two ways to get information. Ted Koppel and this really like esoteric means of collection. So with Ted Koppel, they would just bring in the cameras and like they would kind of show over his shoulder and this and that. But the remote viewers physically mapped out the floor plan of the embassy, U.S. embassy, so that Delta would have it. And he was just...
Now, wait a second. Why would Delta have not... Why would we not have already had access to that if it was our embassy?
You know how government is, right?
Yeah, not exactly organized.
I'm sure they had floor plans on site, right? But they didn't have access. The U.S. government didn't have access to that because the Iranians were controlled or had controlled the embassy.
Then by then they did. That's crazy, though, that they wouldn't keep like a fucking copy of that in Langley. But they're able to create the floor plan of it so that if there's some sort of drop in, Delta knows where they're going.
Oh, they have something.
Yeah.
Right.
Do we know which remote viewers did that, by the way?
I don't know. I would imagine maybe it was Joe McMoneagle because he would have been active at that time.
That's what was coming to mind.
The rest of them, though, like Morehouse was kind of later in that cycle, but he just would have seen previous remote viewers. They also, I think, remote viewed the locations of some of the people that were taken, the hostages from Beirut.
When was that?
83?
Like 82, 83?
Yeah, 82, 83, something like that.
How many pouches, cups of coffee, or energy drinks did you need per day to stop yourself from crashing or even from feeling nicotine withdrawal? Isn't it funny how you'll do everything in your power to stay healthy, whether that be going to the gym, eating well, getting 8 hours of sleep, but then still stay reliant on putting chemicals in your body just for energy? Well, that's why I started using Ultra pouches, and they've been a complete game changer for my focus and energy levels. Deef over here has been pounding these pouches forever, and it's easy to see why. Hey, yo. These pouches are completely nicotine-free and caffeine-free, which obviously is going to make you think, if they don't have nicotine or caffeine, then what exactly is in them in the first place? It's a great question. Ultra partnered with leading neuroscientists to design these pouches. They are clinically proven nootropics and adaptogens to deliver immediate focus and smooth energy that lasts 1 to 2 hours. More specifically, they use Infinity PX, a cleaner, smoother energy boost than caffeine, L-theanine, alpha-GPC, and vitamins B6 and B12. These are truly clean, plant-powered pouches designed to sharpen your mind and lift your energy, all without caffeine, nicotine, or crash. They're absolutely blowing up. You can use Ultra pouches everywhere from your desk or as a little pick-me-up before you start your workout. It's trusted by top athletes, entrepreneurs, and engineers around the world. And they have 5 insanely good flavors to choose from, including tropical, which is my favorite. Ultra is the ultimate guilt-free pouch, delivering instant focus and mental clarity without nicotine or caffeine. New customers can use code Julian to get 15% off at takeultra.com. That link is in my description below. That's takeultra.com for 15% off when you use code Julian at checkout. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them I sent you.
So now the other thing that's important to know, like just like any intelligence collection method, you can't put 100% in it, right? It's also not a good idea to put everything on one viewer, right? It's best to have a constellation of viewers independently viewing the same target.
Like in separate rooms, blind completely.
Yep. and then taking the correlation of those things and seeing where things match.
Yeah.
And then those are more likely to be correct, but it's not like a fail-safe. It's always right 100% of the time. I think usually it's around, for a good viewer, maybe 60% accurate. But, if I just give you pencil and paper and tell you to describe literally anything in the universe.
And I'm 60% accurate.
And you're
Sign me up,
60%,
Chief.
Yeah, and you're 60% accurate, something's going on.
Yeah.
Like something is accurate.
What do we know about that science? I've talked to different people about this, but you're pretty deep into it, because before I actually ask that question, the one part where I've had conversations with different remote viewers or people that have been around remote viewers where they'll make a claim where I'm like, I don't know about that, is when they'll say, well, technically most people can actually tap into this and do this. And actually my friend, Dr. Julian Mossbridge, who's amazing, I believe she was even saying something like that. And that was the one thing where I'm like, Julia, I feel like, if you're doing this, that's one thing, but I don't know if me, Joe, and Nacho are going to start seeing fucking, Iraqi prisons in 2 seconds right now if we had to lock in and do it. So what is the science that allows at least some people to do it? And what is the, in your opinion, the validity of an argument from people like Julia that might say a lot of people could technically do it?
Yeah, so a number of things to unpack. So number one, when they were first coming up with this protocol, they were doing these outbounder experiments, right? Where they would just send a team out to some location, and then they would just ask somebody, like, just describe where this team is. They weren't using the numbers or anything like that yet. But then Ingo Swann was tasked by the Army, like, look, we can't do this loosey-goosey, like, I'm feeling my aperture perception's opening, and I'm feeling it, like I'm in the right mood, and like we need soldiers to be able to do this. So we need to have a step-by-step protocol where, you can train anybody to do it. And that's real. It's just like, can everybody play basketball? Well, like the paralyzed person probably can't, right? But most people can. Right? Are they going to be good at it? No. But they can, most people have the capacity to play. It's the same thing with psi ability. But the reason it's not more widespread, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, is that does our intelligence community really want like 2 middle-aged women like remote viewing Langley, Virginia and then posting it on Twitter?
That's the thing. Where does it stop? Like you can't put like a fucking iron dome of remote viewing around any place you want.
There are means to do it, but
there are.
But a Faraday cage ain't going to do it, right?
Okay.
Like it works through Faraday cages, so it's not. I don't want to say it's not electromagnetic, but it's like a non-local form of perception. You're talking about quantum mechanics. Quantum coupling, that sort of stuff, because everybody's connected. This you hear this kind of like a mantra, but there's something to that. In terms of, sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I was talking about what is the science behind being able to do it, and the other part of it was like, which is kind of what you were just talking about, which is, well, could everyone technically do it? That kind of thing.
So the answer to that is most people have the capacity to do it, but it's like anything, it requires practice. In terms of the science, I've heard a variety of different explanations. So at the biological level, the person that you want to look at is a remote viewer called Edward Reardon. Now, he doesn't have a science background. He's not a biologist. He's arrived at the way he thinks it works entirely through his own kind of perception and remote viewing. So again, I'd have to there's a whole episode I do with him on this, and I'm not cued in, but there's some parts of the brain, I think this CA3 component of the brain is somehow related. The caudate putamen is also somewhat related to it. And then there's a way that you receive, kind of think of the information that people receive from non-local consciousness is like just cloud computing, right? And then the brain is a transceiver. So it comes from somewhere. And then your brain detects, decodes, and objectifies this information as it comes in.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's kind of the biological side of it. And then as it starts going through your brain, it passes through all those parts of the brain that, again, I'm not an expert on it. And this is just, and it's also his own perception. In terms of how I think a David Morehouse has described it, and, we'll get into, you've, I'm sure heard of Itzhak Bentov and
Morehouse has done a couple great podcasts with Danny in the past, but yeah, there's a lot of legendary names here.
So the way he would explain it is there's this 8-dimensional holographic field, right? And what we're doing is we're accessing that field, and we're trying to collapse that data into 3-dimensional, or actually 4-dimensional space-time, right? Because there's a time component of the 4th dimension. And you're just kind of reaching out that information that everybody is able to access. There are also, and this kind of goes separately, I'm taking kind of another area of physics that I know very little about, but is similar. And this is like the E8 lattice theory, right? Which again, it's like this reality is some 8-dimensional hypercube, and there are little tiny crystals that are part of it that are of Planck length, right? And our reality is basically a projection of that into lower dimensions. So think of it as like a shadow of a higher dimension, and it's built out of something they call quasi-crystals. There's something about Lie groups. Don't ask me what a Lie group is. I'm not a physicist, but that could also be a similar mechanism to what Morehouse was explaining.
How do you spell Lie group? Is it
LIE?
Like LIE?
Yeah,
like
LIE.
That? Can we pull that up, Steve?
Yeah, you're going to get like physicist gibberish. Like it's going to be like.
Well, let's try to decode it in New Jersey right here. See what we got.
Oh, we're looking at the I Ching, huh?
Well, we had that earlier.
Yeah, LIE. You're going to get some like
Lie groups and remote sensing scene classification. That sounds about right? In this.
Yeah, it's mathematics too. So it's like Lie groups are applied to.
Yeah, you already searched it.
Put E8 lattice Lie group.
Is that how you spell? You want it spelled? The E8 lattice is a highly symmetric 8-dimensional structure linked to the largest exceptional Lie group containing 240 root points. I understood all that. I just want to be very clear.
Yeah,
I know exactly what I'm picking up what they're lifting.
Yeah, the root points are pretty important.
It acts as go back to that deep. Sorry. It acts as a potential foundation for unified field theories, notably used by A. Garrett Lisi to suggest a connection between particles, forces, and gravity. The 248-dimensional E8 Lie group represents a complex 8-dimensional crystal structure. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, so that not only is a potential explanation for remote viewing, it's also a potential explanation for what's going on with when people talk about interdimensional beings and stuff like that.
This is an explanation for that.
Yeah. Yeah. If every reality is a shadow of this other reality, right? And you change an object, there'll be like an infinite number of overlapping shadows. So think of a reality or dimension. The thing that pisses me off is every time one of these like whistleblowers, they're not whistleblowers, you know how I know they're not whistleblowers? Because they're still alive. So I'm just, so they've been allowed to talk about whatever they're talking about. Like obviously they've been cleared to talk about it. So whenever they talk about interdimensionality, stuff like that, like they never explain what that means, right? Like I think Eric Weinstein was on Twitter, like he was constantly complaining about it. Why are there no physicists, blah, 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 blah. But he's got a point in the sense that like no one ever explains what they mean by interdimensional beings. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean like different realities that are overlapping?
Does it mean like what Philip K. Dick did in Man in the High Tower, where they're just going between dimensions of actual reality?
I think that's exactly what it means. But no one ever defines it. They just talk about it. But I think that's what this E8 lattice theory kind of explains. And this is where there's a British researcher, an American researcher, and an Irish researcher. So Steve Mera, Barry Fitzgerald, and then relatively newer on the scene is Nathaniel Gillis, where like Steve Mera started with like poltergeist activity and kind of like looking at the Scole experiment. Are you familiar with the Scole experiment?
The Scole experiment?
Scole, Scole.
Refill me in.
This is more people should know about because it is absolutely wild. So they did an experiment in England in the town of Scole in the 90s. Okay. And in that experiment, you're familiar with like Stephen Greer and his CE5.
Uh-huh.
That's just another flavor of this, which back in the day during the spiritualist movement, people would have would engage in seances, right? Mm-hmm. So they typically have, I want to say it's like 5 or 7 sitters, where they have people sit around the table and they all kind of get into like a trance-like state, and they summon or invoke entities, okay? So they systematically tried to do this in 1992 and documented and recorded everything that happened. So typically it would start with poltergeist activity. Then they would start to see or hear disembodied voices, and then they would got into a closer thing where and they would swap out people because you have to have the right number of folks around the table. And then they would eventually experience apports. So you know what an apport is? Mm-hmm. It's just when something will just materialize out of thin air, like a marble, or like when you start going into the whole cryptid.
The cryptid
thing.
This is layered.
That happens with all that, or has been suggested to happen with. I think a lot of it's similar stuff. It's just called different things. Mm. So, things started materializing. And then at some point there was like entities that they started physically seeing, and they have one on camera. Like I can't make it up. It's called Mr. Blue. Just look it up. Right. And there's just like, it looks like a gray. It's just like glowing blue and just kind of on camera. Anyway, there's also a technique called quantum imaging where they're able to take, somehow access these overlapping realities and take pictures around. Again, I haven't seen it. I haven't experienced it. I'm just reporting.
Just reporting the facts.
Okay.
Gotcha. Oh, there it is. Does that look familiar?
Yep, that's it.
That's not creepy looking at all. Holy shit.
What ended up happening is the experiment kind of got out of control and they just stopped it. But anyway, Steve Mira pointed me to this E8 lattice theory as kind of a model of reality that's close to that.
Yeah, I do. I really do think there's something to the different dimensions of possibility. And I've really thought this since talking with Michio Kaku back in episode 145 a few years ago, because to me, he always explained it the best, where he'd talk about like, imagine if you had a transistor radio and you just turned it a little bit, and instead of us two, there'd be a dinosaur right here. And I'm like, that actually clocks, because to me, we're so far away from wherever the bottom layer of physics is, and there are so many different weird things that happen, and I'm spaghettiing a bunch of things in my head right now that are inexplicable, whether it be something like deja vu or dreaming something into existence, or the fact that you dream it all and basically turn into a nightly death state in a way, going outside your own consciousness to understand something else or see things that could be real or later come real in the world. All these things like put together, followed by the happenstance of time and place and situation and all the possible outcomes with like the butterfly effect and things like that. To me, it would make sense that there are different physical realities that exist based on each distinct possibility, if that makes sense. Like this is where it gets into like time travel and stuff like that as well. But that was kind of what sold me on some of this, because when you talk to Michio about time travel, he's like, it's not as simple as going back to April 14th, 1965 and making sure John Wilkes Booth doesn't make it in there with the gun. You can go do that, but you're not changing the reality you're coming from. You're creating a new estuary on the river, and you're changing a different reality, meaning a different dimension for what that is. And this is exactly what Philip K. Dick laid out effectively. And that seems like there is a there.
So the question is if there are entities that have kind of figured this out first, they might be poking into this reality. Again, I'm pure spec.
Let's go.
Yeah, pure spec, right? They could be poking in it. I mean, and that's the same thing could be how time works. It sounds like in the block universe, again, I'm not a physicist. I think the way it works is that everything is kind of, it's already happened. And if you just went back, you're not going to change anything, because if you change something, that was the way it was always supposed to be. It sounds like Michio Kaku's referring to something different. Maybe it's like a Hugh Everett many worlds theory, right? But the thing about that, though, is the math, and again, not a physicist, don't fully understand it, is that once a reality is set, all the possibilities collapse, and you can never go to a parallel like that. That branch is forever closed. Now, maybe there's some other way to get there, and which he seems to be referencing, because, I think Hugh Everett's many worlds interpretation was like in the 1960s. So there's been a lot of changes since then. And I think the way that this stuff works, wouldn't necessarily have to have been classified, right? You've heard the Mark Andreessen, he had that interview where they were talking about AI and somebody in the White House, and they were talking about, we're going to need to classify some of this. And Mark Andreessen's like, how are you going to classify basic? Like, this is mathematics. You can't classify mathematics. And whoever he was talking to at the White House said, we absolutely can. We've classified whole areas of physics. So, yeah, it's on Twitter. You can find it. Like, it's just.
Can we find that, Deef? We've classified whole areas of physics. That's the word they use.
Yeah. That's not surprising.
It's not. It's just the brazenness of just saying that out loud to a dude who's going to run on Joe Rogan and then say that. That's interesting to me. Wow. Because, like, do you think, little sidebar here, you think they got shit like anti-gravity?
Maybe. Maybe.
Where would it come from if they had it? Like, did they get it from somewhere else?
Well, then we get into kind of layers of control, right? When you talk about Epstein.
I wasn't even going there, but do sign me up. Let's go.
Well, I'll give you an example. There's somebody just told me the name, but Epstein's bragging about this cold fusion guy that he just
Pons.
Yeah, Stanley Pons, right? Where he's just like, yeah, I took care of him. So anytime there's an invention like that, there's just some weird system above the nation state level that just kind of shuts things off or makes them go away. And there are folks that I've interviewed who I can't verify any of these claims, and that's the other thing too. That this deep into the interview, I need to emphasize. There's a ton of mis and disinformation in this that is deliberately meant to steer you away from things. So, as an example, like the Tic Tac thing, the fact that they're, it's definitely not Russia or China. Like, it's definitely not. Now, could it be ours?
Like what they saw around the Nimitz and all that? Yeah.
Now, it could be ours. And the reason I say it could be ours is because what they're trying to tell us what it is, right? They're like pushing away from that.
Why do you say it's just at the outset? Why do you say it's definitely not Russia or China to start?
Because we wouldn't be the global hegemon if that were the case.
They had that.
Yeah, there's no way.
I agree with you.
So anyway, kind of just going back to it, but I don't think it's ours, but I'm willing to, admit that I could easily be wrong.
Yeah, that's actually one, because to get more specific, one of the stories you hear with that is David Fravor, Commander David Fravor, who talks about seeing the Tic Tac and then has the video of it that shows something clearly doing some weird shit that was technology we didn't have in 2004 and we still don't have right now. That said, I'd be open to it being something else for sure, meaning not of this universe. But I've always looked at that one, and I don't know why. I just love how he describes it, because he's just giving you the facts of what he saw and letting you decide. I appreciate that about David Fravor. I look at that one and I go, if DARPA was talking telepathically to dolphins in fucking 1992, I feel like they might have had some weird tic-tac flying in odd directions by 2004. Maybe I'm crazy, but...
So this is the reason I don't think it's ours. So I spent, 4 out of my 5 years in the Army training U.S. forces for Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So I was what they would call the Red Team, Op 4, was an expert in Soviet doctrine and tactics because that's what we were focused on.
In what? Soviet?
Doctrine and tactics.
Okay.
Before 9/11, right? After 9/11, we changed things up a little bit but we would have these massive war games with, 5 to 10,000 people on both sides. And it was like a big advanced version of laser tag. We had these little like Raytheon kind of lasers that could reach out and touch something 2 kilometers away. And then there'd be a little light and we would track everything.
Where would you do this?
In the Mojave Desert, Fort Irwin.
That's kind of gangster.
U.S. National Training Center. It was a blast because unlike many other kind of countries, the way that we train as we fight, right? But our mission was to beat the shit out of whoever they put us up against so we could expose all the areas of weakness that they could shore up before they went to actual combat. But having had that experience, it's highly dangerous, right? And you don't inject things that the people who are on either side don't know about. So, and that was just kind of ground, some limited air, right? We would call in A-10s and stuff like that just to...
Whoa. You're going all out.
Yeah, it was... we would use CS gas because we were Russian. We could use chemical weapons. So, I mean...
you're playing the Russians.
Oh, yeah. We do paper... and we also would do deception, right? So I would go buy like 100 blue paper plates from Walmart, and we would lay them out like minefields, right? And then, we'd just wait in the keyhole position, and the unit would come in and think they're minefields. They're just, they could just drive around, and then we would ambush them and kill them, right?
Oh my god!
So yeah, we got
with the
really
fake
into
Raytheon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just like
They're still alive.
Called the whoopee light. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like whoop whoop
Yeah.
whoop. Like we gotcha, right?
Do you talk to him in the Russian accent too? Like we got you, motherfucker.
No,
You're not doing that.
But
You got to play the part. Come on.
it was fun. It was fun
It
because we
seems
just
I can see your eyes going back there.
yeah. It was. I mean, it was like getting out there and like getting all the equipment back and all that. Like that was just a pain in the ass. But once like that 3 to 4 hours of like fake combat, which is not, it's not real. I have buddies who went overseas after that. I didn't go overseas, which I regret. But most people who went overseas, like, you didn't miss anything, buddy. You're okay. But they said that it gave them a pretty good experience. The only thing that it didn't do well is it didn't simulate the kinetic aspects. Like when I fire this rocket into a wall, there's going to be shrapnel, right? And anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So
No, it's good. I like tangents.
the point is when you're, these operations were mainly on the ground and there were no surprises. Could you imagine if you're flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft on a, trying to land on a aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean? You're just going to be like, surprise! Here's something that's absolutely crazy and you don't expect. I'm not saying it wouldn't be done, but it would be highly, highly irresponsible to do something like that because, the military cares very much about safety, cares very much about protocol, and that would be the most unsafe thing I could possibly imagine that you would do, aside from setting a carrier on fire just to,
Right.
for feels, right? So that's why I don't think it's ours.
I also think about the compartmentalization structure, though, too. Because, like, even just within one agency, you pick it, NSA, CIA, DIA, like, there will be brilliant high-level dude over here and then brilliant high-level dude on something else over here. They never talk to each other. This guy's read in on all this crazy shit that this guy's not, and vice versa. So it's like, when you talk about places being able to keep a secret, a lot of times the head of the snake, the top of the chain, I should say, doesn't even know what's going on down below them. Like, Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of War right now. I mean, I'm not just saying this because it's Pete Hegseth. I'm saying in general, like, he doesn't know fucking 3/4 of the shit probably that happens at the Pentagon in SCIFs and things like that. So if we did have something like a Tic Tac, it's not even like Delta Force or the Navy SEALs or some of these guys would hypothetically know about it. I see your argument, though, that it's like...
completely unsafe, right?
Yeah.
So, again, I'm open to it's possible. So, where was I going with this? I forget.
Yeah, that was a good tangent.
Oh, I know. So, we were talking about Epstein. So, I don't think Epstein is like the layer of control that's out there, but he's the one that kind of was exposed and slipped through. I think at the highest levels, you're talking like Rockefeller Foundation, World Economic Forum, Bilderberg Group, the Atlantic Council. Who else? I'm missing one.
Trilateral Commission.
The Trilateral, and that gets...
I'm starting to wonder if some of those places are even fronts too.
I think many of them are. I think it just keeps going, right?
Yeah.
But what I think is that there's some level of control that we wouldn't even recognize.
Yeah.
And I think when we see stuff like this, like every time we mess around with nukes, right? So we're in Jersey, right? The Jersey drones.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of those were ours, but I think the only reason some of those were ours is because there was things that were flying in our airspace that were not ours, were not Russian, were not Chinese, and we just flooded the zone with our own stuff in order to confuse matters so that public officials could say, oh yeah, those are just ours.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you also look at where they fly these things, right? So in Jersey, they were centered around Picatinny Arsenal at around the time that I think in 2009, you can check me, the audience should check me because I'm not recall exactly, but I think we removed all our tactical nukes from Britain, right, or the UK. So places like Lakenheath, stuff like that, where there were also a lot of drone sightings at around the same time.
Interesting.
So, I know Picatinny Arsenal is a place where they have weapons and stuff like that, but if I had to guess, I think we probably were kind of reinstalling nuclear triggers in like W-67 gravity bombs, nuclear gravity bombs.
Okay, in English. What does that mean?
So just the components of tactical nukes that are dropped from like B-52 bombers and things like that, like just setting up the triggering mechanisms to make them work, right? My guess, and this is just guess, pure spec, right, is that they were putting these things back together and they were shipping them back over to Lakenheath as things were heightening with the Russians. Because this was back in, was it like 2024? Maybe
yes,
this
December
happened?
2024 specifically.
But it was even before that. It
started a little bit, but
in
it
like
got
November
crazy
in Lakenheath. Yeah, in Jersey
December.
it was particular. So
Yeah.
that would be my. There was also there's a base, I think Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, where I think it's like the 8th Strategic Bombing Wing, which has also experienced a ton of these sightings at the same time. So didn't hear about it too much, but I have friends who were just getting, texts and DMs from retirees, like Air Force retirees, saying like these things are flying over, they're not ours, it's crazy, et cetera, et cetera. So anytime we start messing around with nukes or start moving around nukes, these things always come out.
Yeah.
So they're like in my opinion, some element of a control mechanism. Do we control it? I doubt it. I think something above that layer of reality that Epstein kind of provides a peek into, is just kind of reining the hairless monkeys in.
Yeah, a little sidebar from Epstein, then we'll come right back to that. Back when that was happening, and then in the year after that, some different times, it came up a few times when I was on some other shows, I think. I had talked about some sources that I had from back in that period who were giving me information, and the thing was, like, they were all off record, and the one guy who was like, I could say something, it was still, like, mostly off record. So I was pretty much, kind of sucked. Like, I was pretty much blue-ballsing people, but I should say, because I kind of looked at this about 6-7 months ago when something else happened and I talked to some of these people, the confidence I had previously in what this guy had told me it was, where I was like, we're all good. Don't worry about it. I have a lot less confidence in what he said now. And I won't go further into that, but I think it's important to be able to say, like, if there's someone you thought and had very good reason to believe was an excellent source of information, and then you get new information thinking that might not be the case, you should probably say that. So I never reported exactly what it was, thank God. So I don't have to go off that, but that should be said as well. That said, your argument about it having to do, at least in the realm of tactical nukes and things like that, of all the things that I heard talking with people either that had information or were smart people who could speculate on it, that was always the best argument. Whether or not that was like some country got a dirty bomb in and we were sniffing, or we were trying to plan our own shit to be able to do that, I don't fucking know.
Yeah, I think the dirty bomb argument is not a... Like, there are certain smoke detectors that have radioactive material in them. Like, I'm not going to go any further than that, but, like, you don't need to be fancy, right?
Right.
You probably should cut that one out. But, I mean, there was a case. There was a public case. It was in Long Island, I think. There was this guy, and I think he died of radioactive exposure, but he just got smoke detectors and collected this massive amount of aramecium. It's like Americum or Americium, something like that. It's like American, basically, with an IUM.
Got it.
So, and, you know, he was exposed to radiation poisoning because he just got a lot of smoke detectors and put something together and was arrested and everything was fine. But,
well, I mean, did he die from radiation poisoning?
I don't know. It's been a while.
Okay.
Probably.
Hopefully he's still kicking. Shout out whoever you are.
Yeah,
you were right, by the way, based on your query a few minutes ago when you were talking about, well, Defoe's the other one you had, about moving the stuff to Britain. Didn't you have one up about that? Yeah. Let's get that. So, based on reports from the Federation of American Scientists and The Guardian, the United States completed the withdrawal of its nuclear weapons from Britain in 2008. Approximately 110 B-61 gravity bombs were removed from RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, ending a 50-year presence. Mm-hmm. That's similar to what you were saying.
Yeah,
like,
so I think I brought it back because of, and that's the timing was when all these, you know, not orbs, but UAPs were flying over.
Why do you think we've had, and I think this is great, by the way, because I get scared of this sometimes, but, you know, we've had the nuke for over 80 years now. The world has. And after we got it with the Manhattan Project and Nagasaki and Hiroshima happened, obviously other governments around the world were able to develop it and more got it over the years. Why do you think through all the chaos, all the disagreements, all the despots, all the tyrannies, everything that's existed geopolitically around the world in those 80 years, the one thing that even the craziest people have never done, at least that we know of, is hit that button?
Game theory.
Yeah.
So just mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Right. And this is like, you've seen like the Beautiful Mind movie.
Yeah, with Russell Crowe.
Yeah. That whole science was, the primary purpose of it was to game or prevent nuclear war and make sure that we weren't, actually a crazy story about that. So we were constantly during the 80s. So there's a concept called the nuclear triad, right? Mm-hmm. Where we want to make sure that we're able to deliver a second strike capability in case we're surprised by a first nuclear event, right? So the strategic nuclear triad is, you have SLBMs, right? Submarine launched ballistic missiles. You have submarines around the world. Then you have the, you know, SAC, Strategic Air Command, I think, right? Where you have strategic bombers that are flying around constantly in case something happens. And then you have ICBMs, right? So intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? That capability. So my thesis advisor when I was at the Kennedy School was Dr. Ash Carter. He ultimately became Secretary of Defense in the Biden administration. But when he was younger, he was working in the DOD, and he's working for Defense Secretary Caspar Weinberger. And they were looking at other transportation modes to ensure the survivability of the nuclear deterrent. So he looked at everything. And one of the craziest things he looked at, I'm just saying this because he just walked in the room one day and he just like blurted this out, and we're like, what the fuck? So they looked at putting these things, MX missiles, right? So MX missiles that had like a MIRV on the end, which is multiple independent reentry vehicle. So like I think Minuteman IIIs maybe at the time, which is you launch the missile and then it separates into, multiple nukes that are independently target.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things that they looked at was putting these things on airships, or in other words, Goodyear blimps.
Yeah.
So
I don't like that.
It seems like a really bad idea.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's even worse than you think it is. So, he did his due diligence and called like the Goodyear blimp company. And they're like how safe are these things? And they're just like, well, every year we collect hundreds of rounds of like rifle rounds because Bubba's sitting on his porch in like rural Ohio. And it's just like, I think I can hit it. Right. And yeah, they take shots at these things. So obviously, as far as I know, we didn't.
Imagine what Abdullah's doing when they fly over.
So obviously it was, they ruled it out. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, I hope so. Jesus Christ.
Anyway, so where was I going with this? What were we talking about?
Well,
before?
we were talking about Epstein.
Yeah.
And we were coming back to that. And I don't want to lead question you here because I want to see if you're going somewhere without me saying, but what was the context of you talking about him?
Just a layer of control.
Oh, yes. Okay. So before I get to what I'm thinking of, I agree with you that he is almost like a door into the house rather than the house itself.
Right.
And I've cited a lot of times what Tucker Carlson said about there being like a supra government. I think he's spot on with that. And it's like, for people who haven't heard me say this a million times, it's like the layer we used to think was the top, which is like the president and the most powerful heads of states and the most powerful heads of industry around the world, is actually layer 3. And above them are 2, billionaire and gazillionaire classes. At the top, you have your silent banking families and stuff like that who really actually pull the strings. You mentioned the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, families like this. And then in between them, you have a fixer class of elite, very wealthy billionaire individuals who work for those people and basically are the messengers to the real people below who are the figureheads. And so the way I've always looked at it is Jeffrey Epstein was just a rich Mike Ehrmantraut. Walter White thought he was fucking in control of everything. Then Mike Ehrmantraut would roll up in a Lincoln Town car, listen to Walter White rant for 30 minutes, slap him like a bitch, and remind him who the boss was. But Mike Ehrmantraut wasn't the top of it. He had to go report to Gus Fring and other guys who were really, really running things. And I think you're right about that with respect to Epstein, because it's like, okay, here's this awful guy, sex trafficker, obviously pedophile, arms dealer, fucking currency hunter, you name it. He's doing all these different things. But like, it's not just he wasn't seeing all the money coming from that. Where's it all going?
Oh, this is survivorship bias, right?
Survivorship bias.
Yeah. So people assume, it's just like with like UAP abductions alleged, right? Uh-huh. Like there are a lot of people that just disappear. All we're seeing is the people that come back.
Right.
Right. So same, and I won't go on that route, but same thing with Epstein. We're only seeing like what's been like the person that screwed up, right? He messed up. He wasn't very good at what he was doing, right?
Yeah.
We think he was good at what he was doing, but he got caught, right? How many people didn't get caught, right? So I think that there is this level of control that we don't see, because if you look at the symptoms or the outcomes that's coming out of this, right? If you try to put a rational spin on them, right, none of it makes any fucking sense, right? So just take the events of the last 5 years, for instance, right? So globally, you have this massive aging population with the baby boomers, right, which threatens to destabilize kind of the economies of the world because they have to be supported by fewer and fewer workers, okay? At the same time, you also have people consuming a lot more resources. You have AI coming into space at kind of the exact time necessary. You have all these 22 million illegal immigrants seemingly flooding into the country. Mm-hmm. You have, without going into it, you can probably surmise what I'm talking about. Psychological sterilizations.
Psychological sterilizations.
You convince people to do things to themselves so that they can't have children, right? Yeah. Everything is based on all this stuff kind of drives toward one conclusion, and that's depopulation in some sense.
Yeah.
Okay. You had kind of mRNA. I'll just leave it at that, right? That just comes just at the right time. And also it comes at a time when you need all these data centers that are going to increasingly drain power from the grid, and you're going to have to choose between AIs and humans, right? You're also going to, you're going to have a huge restive population that doesn't have jobs, right? And it's not like the people at the bottom, it's the people who can plot and make things happen.
Yes.
Right? Well, how do you handle that? How are you going to be ready for that? And do you see our political class like proactively coming up with any solutions for this other than what you are seeing kind of happen in real time? Like, why do you import all these people? So you can drive wages down and, get rid of the population that, consumes more resources. That's why it happened in the United States and not China.
And that's
right?
And what's crazy is when you look over the past 30 years, I'll just leave it at that.
Again, pure spec.
I think there's a lot on there that you have a lot of data for, though, to prove it. But like with just the immigration thing, when you look at the past 30 years, this is something that at different points, the Republicans and Democrats have been at fault for in ways. And obviously the parties change over time and the figureheads and stuff like that change over time. But it feels very, very coordinated in that way because they also make the regular immigration system so broken. So they incentivize that to happen.
Well, just take the latest like Iran war. Like what are the downstream impacts of that going to be?
Crazy.
Well, like 25% of U.S. farmers don't have the fertilizer, particularly nitrogen-based fertilizer that they're going to need for the harvest in the fall, right? So what's going to happen with that? Well, you're going to have the United States. It won't necessarily. It all depends on how the summer goes, right? If you have a dry summer, it could be really bad, right? So in the United States, it'll probably manifest itself by just even more food inflation, things like that. But, probably enough to have people kind of creeping into other people's homes to try to find food. It could get really bad. You're going to have other places like Bangladesh, Pakistan, kind of areas in Africa where there's going to be mass starvation, right? Just because you're tweaking.
Yes.
Otherwise the war doesn't make any goddamn sense.
No.
Right? And again, like I did my master's thesis on this fucking thing 20 years ago.
On Iran.
Yeah.
What was the genesis or the idea behind your thesis besides just like Iran itself?
Well, so stepping all the way back, what I wanted to do is we were looking at a kind of nuclear nonproliferation, right? Like the dominant U.S., not dominant, but a U.S. strategy at the time was you want as few countries having nuclear weapons as possible because it just increases the probability of nuclear accidents and misperception, et cetera. And at the time, I looked at kind of two futures, right? And there's like kind of three possibilities. There's a diplomatic solution, and then there's that's plan A. Plan B is what I looked at, which is you either coerce them from not getting the bomb, or you learn to live with an uranium bomb, okay? And again, at the time, I had different notions of the Israeli government. I thought they were really allies, and I bought into all the propaganda, okay? So like if I redid it today, my master's thesis would be how do we disarm Israel? Because if you really care about nonproliferation, they shouldn't have a bomb, right?
Interesting.
But back then I was looking at, how do we prevent the Iranians from getting it?
Well, with Israel, you have to get them to admit they have one to start with, even though we know they do.
We just did the same thing we did with Iraq. We just go to the UN and show it, right? We know it's like Savannah River plutonium that's in there. Yeah. Like we know all this stuff.
We've known since '67.
Right.
It's wild.
But what I did is I looked at, so if we were to get the bomb, if we were to prevent them from getting the bomb, there were different stages. There was kind of the political component that would dovetail in the economic component, and then you'd have military options, okay? So on the political component, it was like asset freezes, like we did to the Russian oligarchs, travel bans and stuff like that on key Iranian officials. And that would dovetail into economic sanctions. So I just systematically went into all their the imports and exports, figured out which countries supplied them, and then just came up with a map of who because most of it was supplied by the European Union at the time, and then just provided a blueprint for where you would go to which country and say, hey, just turn this off, turn that off.
Right.
It's been a while. And then after that, it was kind of what are some of the military options. So I looked at various precedent campaigns that we would have. There was kind of the single bombing strike, right, on one place, which is like the Osirik reactor bombing that the Israelis did in 1981.
Okay.
Right, where they bombed Iraq. You know about that, right?
Not ringing a bell.
Yeah, there's a book, I forget what it's called. There's not a lot about it, but they had to put all these extra fuel tanks on an F-15 and.
Let's look this up. 1981 Israeli Yasirat. Is that what you said it's called?
Osirak. It's
Osirak.
like Osirak. It's the Osirik reactor.
I don't think I'm familiar with that. All right, so also known as Operation Babylon was a surprise airstrike conducted by Israeli Air Force on June 7th, 1981, which destroyed an unfinished Iraqi nuclear reactor located 17 kilometers southeast of Baghdad, Iraq. The Israeli operation came a year after the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force had caused minor damage to the same nuclear facility in Operation Scorched Sword, with the damage having been subsequently repaired by French technicians. Operation Opera and related Israeli government statements following it established the Begin Doctrine, I guess after
Menachem Begin.
Menachem Begin, the prime minister. The Begin Doctrine, which explicitly stated the strike was not an anomaly, but instead a precedent for every future government in Israel. Israel's counter-proliferation preventative strike added another dimension to its existing policy of deliberate ambiguity as it related to the nuclear weapons capability of other states in the region.
So that's one potentially looked at. There's also the I don't know if it's Op Plan 5027 or Op Plan 5026. Can you actually look that up? It's OP Plan.
Got it. Operations Plan 5027 are a series of military operations made by the United States and South Korea for the defense against a popular North Korean invasion.
So try 5026 then. I think
Okay.
it's the other one.
So that's not... Because this is still in Iran we're dealing with for 26?
No, this is North Korea.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, but it's like Op Plan 5027 is, there we go.
Okay, so 5026 has been associated in the available literature with surgical strikes against North Korea that would take out crucial targets, but would not constitute the initiation of a major theater war. One scenario for dealing with North Korea's nuclear program would consist of surgical strikes against facilities believed to be involved with the production, storage, and deployment of nuclear weapons. Such strikes might resemble the Israeli preemptive strike on the Iraqi Osirik nuclear reactor in 1981, using B-2 stealth bombers and F-117 stealth fighters in the United States could strike multiple targets throughout North Korea, including the repossessing facilities at Yongbyon. The deployment of F-117s for the 49th Fighter Wing to South Korea and the deployments of B-52s and B-1Bs to Guam brought a significant degree of capability to the region that might have handled contingencies.
We almost did this in 94.
Really?
So, again, my thesis advisor, Ash Carter, was the one that I believe he wrote this plan.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that they had to be very careful with it is I think they were considering using Tomahawk missiles to hit the Yongbyon reactor. But they had to hit it in such a way that it would entomb the uranium. Otherwise, there would have been like a radioactive plume that would blow south into South Korea.
Whoa.
So, and I think the only reason we didn't do anything, I think Jimmy Carter flew in at the last minute and came up with an agreement, and it didn't happen. So anyway, I looked at those kind of campaigns as precision strike was kind of what that scenario was. But the Iranians had already spread their entire program throughout all of Iran, so you couldn't strike one target. Mm-hmm. So when Trump did Midnight Hammer, I'm like, I know we didn't destroy their nuclear program. They even Bouchier still has a reactor, et cetera, right? So I thought it was just theater, and I was like, thank God.
You thought we weren't going back?
Yeah, I was hoping we weren't going back.
I mean, I was hoping too, but
I thought it was just theater. I thought it was just it had to be theater because they didn't bomb that many targets. It didn't seem, because this thing would have to be sustained.
Why would they publicly come out and say we've removed the threat of their nuclear weapon when they know in the back of their minds they didn't, and they probably knew in the back of their minds, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going
Because, Julian, they always tell us the truth, and they they just got that one wrong that time.
Yeah, even for him, this one's a stretch,
Yeah. So anyway, like you could rule out the precision strike. The next one was kind of what happened, which is the comprehensive bombing campaign. And that's something that the precedent for that would have been the Kosovo campaign that we had.
Oh, yeah.
So you just looked at that. But, and this is where it gets kind of weird. So I did this. I'll just put a pin in this one. Mm-hmm. Because what happened was I did this master's thesis. So then Ash Carter and former Defense Secretary Perry, they had an organization called the Stanford Harvard Preventive Defense Project, right? So they decided to have like a meeting in DC to talk about all this stuff, and I got to go and just be a fly on the wall. But
that's
just
cool.
We'll get back to that because something was said there that subsequently became really creepy. So the third thing that I looked at was like an invasion, right? Mm. And I immediately ruled out like conquering Iran.
And why'd you do that?
Because it was absolutely retarded. Like it made absolutely like, I mean, look, could we win? Sure. But it would be like World War II where everybody gets drafted and you have to go in. But I didn't spend any time on it. But what I did look at was this thing I called and I'm not hearing it at all. I don't see it at all on social media, which leads me to believe that it's still a viable option. So what I looked at was something called the Khuzestan Gambit. And what that is there's an area of southern Iran, southwestern Iran, that is where the majority of their Arab population is, because Iran is made up of many different ethnic groups, but there's a concentration of Arabs there, and it's right across the border from Kuwait. It's about 9,800 square kilometers, which is I don't know, maybe 10 times the size of the state of Rhode Island, something like that. That's where the majority of Iranian oil assets are. So
to this day.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So unless they have some more offshore platforms or things like that, but the method would be, well, you don't have to seize Iran. You just take their oil assets and hold them hostage. Mm. And even then I said, this is insane. Like it would be a Hezbollah summer. Like it would be absolutely extremely fraught with risk. But at the time we also had people in the region, and the drone thing, we're the only ones that had drones, right? And that one thing kind of changes the whole calculus on all of this, right? Because I think we had, 16 bases mostly destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. It's only now coming out, but those of us following kind of knew that would be the case because they weren't. And anybody...
Wasn't that surreal too? It's like, nobody likes the Iranian regime, but like you bomb them, what the fuck you think they're going to do? Sit there and be like, thank you, may I please have some more?
That's basically what our officials were saying. Like, oh my God, and it's just like, guys, what do you expect? Like they've had one problem to think about for 30 fucking years. Yeah. And they thought about it. And we didn't even, my understanding is we had like 3 or 4 minesweepers that weren't even in the region when we started bombing. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
like this is the geostrategic jugular. Like this, in my opinion, is the greatest unforced strategic error in American history.
With each passing day that goes by, you're looking more and more right about that. And I had Trita Parsi in here for episode 382 a few weeks before the war broke out. And he gets all kinds of shit online because people try to say he's like a shill for the regime, which if you knew his story is fucking ridiculous. But it's not to say Trita's right about every single thing. That said...
By the way, the regime, knows who I am because I wrote that fucking report.
Because of that report?
They don't like me. Yeah, they don't like me,
all
right?
Great.
Like, they started following me on Powerful Iran, started following me on Twitter and weird stuff like
awesome.
that.
Did they follow you in here?
I doubt it.
They're not in the room with us right now?
It's just 20 years ago.
Nacho, where are you from, pal? You just came off the street yesterday. If you're IRGC, I'm gonna throw you out that fucking window.
It was 20 years ago. And look, I'm no fan of the Iranians either. But
you have to be a realist.
remember we were talking about stuff that don't make sense? And like, what would you need to do to starve a bunch of people and reduce the population? This is a pretty good...
It's a pretty good fucking thing. Yeah. And everything, strategically speaking, almost everything that Trita said a few weeks before the war is exactly how it played out. And then I talked to him... God, this was probably because the war broke out on like that Friday night, Saturday morning. I remember I talked to Trita. It was the day before I went to Colorado, so that Thursday. So literally like 30 hours before we invaded. And every fucking prediction he had about what would go wrong here is true.
So over the years, people would sometimes reach out to me because look, whenever I have a friend who worked in intelligence at one point, and he said he asked a bunch of people for good research on that problem, on the Iranian problem. And he said everybody sent him that. So it's like, it's out there. And from time to time, like, I have a friend who was a planner and worked on this. So
worked on the active campaign right now.
Well, like probably several versions before that.
Got it.
But in the last, I'll leave it vague.
Somewhat recently.
The bottom line is the Defense Department worked through all this stuff. Like warned, said this is like everything that's happening. They warned during like wargaming and things like that. Like this is exactly how they saw it. And the bottom line is the longer it goes on, it just keeps getting worse.
Yes.
Like that's the conclusion. That's what I can say. And there are other things too that were recommendations that were made. Like maybe we should have some more fiber optic cables so that, this equipment's more survivable. And they're like, well, it's too expensive, blah, blah, blah. So like, but no one really took seriously that someone would be dumb enough to do this. Because Bibi Netanyahu has been telling, presidents since 1985.
They're 2 weeks away.
Yeah, they're 2 weeks. They've been 2 weeks away for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right?
They're more 2 weeks away now
like
than they
years.
were 2 weeks fucking 5 years ago. Just don't forget that math.
Well, here's the thing. They're closer than ever because if I'm Pakistan or China, it's like, you know what, I need to have access to my oil resources. So why don't I just do a little AQ-Con light and just give you a bomb?
Yep.
That's what That's what I would do because this is pure insanity. Pure insanity.
It's like you have to. Like I'm not in those rooms making those decisions, and it's obviously extremely high octane, and you can't fully simulate in any way, shape, or form what it's like in there. But on a general level, you have to operate in a world that's not a utopia because it's not, man.
Right.
There are always going to be countries that are fucking evil, that do evil shit, that don't like you either, that you got to live with because the alternative is worse. And we are seeing that play out in real time. And to your point, anyone with half a brain who had looked at this, let alone someone who wrote a thesis on it 20 fucking years ago, could see that.
Yeah.
And there's just like a handful of people in there that decided, la, 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 I see nothing.
But even the math doesn't make sense, right? We produce, 7 to 8 interceptors a month, right? The Iranians have like tens of thousands of ballistic missiles, and they didn't even use their best missiles yet, right?
And you kind of alluded to this already, but geographically, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, well,
it's a nightmare.
In Kurdistan, it's flatter. Right, it's before the mountains start,
and that's
I'm not saying we should do that.
Right,
but
that's
saying.
one spot though. When you look at the rest of it, you have enormous mountain ranges covering areas. You have unlike Afghanistan. I forget the numbers in Afghanistan, so I don't want to say that. But like you have 93 million people here in Iran. It's bigger. There are some people that support the regime. It's not like fucking 100 to 0 or anything like that.
More of them support it since we've been bombing.
That's exactly.
That's
right.
the other thing too. Like we didn't even try to sell it to the American people. It's just like the arrogance of no, we're just going to do that. Like what? So going back to that meeting. So we had that meeting. We're discussing it, and again,
where you're a fly on the wall.
Where I'm a fly on the wall, and the people present at the meeting. I think like Secretary William Perry was there. Ash Carter was there. A bunch of Iranian experts were there, like people from like the Carnegie Endowment and various other kind of think tanks who were Iranian experts. And I was tasked to kind of invite people who were experts in the problem. But there's some people that showed up that I didn't invite. And there was this UN weapons inspector. His name was David Kay, right? I don't know if you remember him, but he was a weapons inspector.
And he just showed up.
Yeah, he was part of this meeting. So we're just talking about this comprehensive bombing campaign. And we're talking about, Ash Carter's like, well, once you start bombing, you can't stop because it's like mowing the lawn. Like you have to stop them from reconstituting the program. And once you cross that line,
Yes.
like it never stops. So David Kay just randomly pipes in, well, if we start bombing, we should do it during the day. And I'm a former Army officer. Like, we own the night. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So Ash Carter, who's, much more, he's sadly passed, I think a few years ago, but, he's much more refined than I am. He's a Rhodes Scholar, and he says, so that's interesting. Why would you bomb during the day? And without skipping a beat, David Kay says, to kill their scientists. 2 years later, remember those motorcyclists who would roll in, put a sticky bomb in the window? That started happening. So I'm not saying that's where the decision was made, but like this stuff was swirling about in those circles for a while before that started happening. But yeah, it was at the Willard Hotel, in the shadow of the White House.
You're just in there, like witnessing war games history.
Yeah, but again,
did you hand out your thesis to everyone? Like print a copy?
No, it was part of the required reading materials.
Oh, they put it in the required reading materials.
Yeah.
Oh, you're like that.
I was just fly on the wall, man.
I'm just,
fly on the wall.
Here to observe, sir. What else do you know about this invasion that you're not saying right now?
No, literally, I just surveyed and talked to people, and that's what they. But notice, like, if you look for that on Twitter, like that word, you don't see it.
Which word?
Khuzestan. You don't see it. Why don't you see it? You see Karg Island, some bullshit. Like, you imagine seizing Karg Island? It's completely exposed, right? Anybody who tries to seize it, yeah, they could easily seize it, but then you would just be completely exposed, not dug in, and you'd be confronted by a hail of Iranian missiles and drones and this and that. That's the one key variable that's changed, is this like mass production of drones since the time I wrote this thesis, and that changes everything.
Oh, yeah.
We're back to like the kind of World War I, when like the Germans and the Russians were thinking about how to employ tanks in combat, right? And the French were like, oh, let's put a tank in every infantry battalion, this and that. And it was the Germans like Heinz Guderian who said, no, we got to put them in concentration. And I think the same is going to be true with drones. So,
we're seeing it play out. Look at how the attacks are going down.
Which is scary too, because the Russians, like, in February 2022, the U.S. military could have run through them like shit through a goose.
Yeah.
Now they've learned how to employ drones in combat.
Yeah, I've had in a couple high-level drone guys this year, ex-military guys running drone companies. Jesse Hamill had him in for a couple episodes, had Brandon Sang in recently. They're both working with AI, doing it, and like they were using the example of the shit that happens in the Russia-Ukraine war with the deployment of drones and just how much it runs the whole battlefield. And they're like, that's been going on since the inception of that war. And they're telling me this, like Brandon was here maybe a couple weeks after Iran broke out, but then Jesse was here a month before that happened, a month and a half before that happened. And they're like, yeah, any war that breaks out right now, that's the delta right there. Like, who's got more effective use of that from like a surveillance capacity and from a straight up payload capacity.
Was it Brandon who was owned the drone company?
They both do. Jesse Hamill has a company called Invictus AI, or is that what it's called? Victus. And then Brandon has one called Shield X or X Shield. I forget. They were both
I think he
Shield AI.
Yeah, I think he's the one who said that they couldn't go rogue. Like they had like things locked down so that the drones couldn't go rogue. Yes, that's right. I think what's going to happen is that, military terminology, every like Army officer is going to know what I'm talking about, and nobody else will. The OODA loop is going to drive the cycle. So it's like observe, orient, decide, act, right? So these are like cycles when you're dealing with an enemy, right? The person, like if you can get inside their OODA loop, which means your decision cycle's tighter, you win, right? So, they joke, I'm inside your OODA loop, whatever. So what I think is going to drive adoption of these things is people are going to figure out that AI is going to be infinitely faster in getting inside these OODA loops, that the winner or the person who becomes paramount in these kind of drone wars is going to have to get to that conclusion. Is going to get to that conclusion faster than everybody else, which then if you extract that back, what about nukes? Right? Are we thinking about that? Right? So this stuff is, extremely scary. Same thing with cyber, right? You're going to have AI hacking. You're going to have counter AI, and you're going to have this Red Queen hypothesis, right? Predator prey, constantly evolving to the point where we're not going to be able to recognize what the hell they're doing.
What if we're already in it and we don't know it?
We probably are.
We probably are.
We probably are.
What makes you say that?
Because I can't be the first person having these ideas, right? And there are people whose full-time job is to think about these ideas. I'm sure somebody probably, just read science fiction, right? I'm sure people, remember Terminator, right?
Uh-huh.
Like that was 1980 that book came out, and it was a Harlan, based I think on a Harlan, there was some lawsuit and all that stuff, but Harlan Ellison probably wrote that in like the 60s, right?
So let me get the second layer of that question then. Do you think that if that is the case and we're already in it, where things that we can't see with technology that we cannot conceive is already controlling outcomes that are predetermined that we have no idea are predetermined, are we therefore in a simulation that's run by an AI god? Hopefully run by a human. Well, I don't know if hopefully is the word, but maybe run by a human.
I really hope that's not true, but if you're talking Occam's razor, right, the simplest explanation tends to be the explanation. That's the simplest. That explains everything, right? It could be used to explain literally everything, right? Why these UAPs don't appear to follow the known laws of physics, this and that. If it were a simulation,
would it explain why I chose to put you in seat 26D today on your flight or yesterday versus like seat 29F?
Yeah, probably. That's why you have again, I don't want to believe this hypothesis because I think I don't like it at all, but it would explain why you have like weird synchronicities sometimes, right?
Synchronicities.
Yeah. So when I was talking to Dean Radin, people who meditate, right? This is like well known in Eastern philosophy. Westerners don't. Like when people start to meditate, weird stuff starts to happen, right? Yeah. And in the Eastern tradition, they call them siddhis. So SIDDHIS. And they're just like signs that you're on the path to enlightenment. You're not supposed to indulge in them. You're supposed to say, gee, that's interesting, and then move on. But the way that they start is you start to have these like synchronicities. Then you start to have, kind of versions of remote viewing, that not remote viewing, but like psychic sensing of some sort, precognition. But when people meditate, they start to have these things, and they're like, especially if they're Westerners, they're like, what the hell is going on? Am I going crazy? And no, it's just part of the way that reality works, however that reality manifests. So like a synchronicity would be, I'll give you a real world example, and I'll give you names too. So there's a experiencer, his name's James Ian Doley. And,
I know this guy. I've definitely talked with him.
He's like in this, he lives like New York area.
Isn't he engaging the phenomenon?
Yes, that's exactly what he is.
Yeah, I've talked with him before.
Yeah.
Nice guy.
Good plug. Good. He gets interviews with like people I can't get interviews with, like Jim Semivan, who that guy.
He's a little.
I have a lot of trouble getting on like former intelligence officials. Like a lot of.
That's not the worst thing in the world, dude. For you.
But why?
Listen,
why?
I've had on guys in the past before I even
now,
thought about any of that shit.
There's some I get on, but
I turned down a lot of them.
Oh, so they reach out to you.
Oh yeah, because like that's the thing, and like that's where people in the audience are right to like question, like why are so many fucking intel guys on all these shows and shit. So like we have a Kiriakou who's like a dissident. I think that's very different, but the range goes from like.
But is he though?
I do think so. Yes, that would actually break my heart if he wasn't.
One thing that they do, and this
really would
take Kiriakou out of this, is in wrestling. You're familiar with kayfabe, right? The hero and the heel, right? It's all fake, but there's like a good guy and there's a bad guy. So, like in this field, let's say, I probably shouldn't use names, but
use names. You're in Jersey. Let's go.
Who's the guy who's in charge of Arrow or was in charge of Arrow? Like Sean Kirkpatrick, right?
Yeah,
he's the heel, right?
Right.
And then you take someone. Look, he may be legit. He may not. I don't know. I'm just using this as a for instance. Okay, pure spec. Okay. Pure spec.
I love that you're using pure spec. That's great.
So Travis Taylor,
okay,
right? Like he's like the hero, right? Doing Skinwalker Ranch stuff, like making sure. But are they really, you know?
Oh, or is it plant? Yeah, no, yeah. It's a extremely valid question. I think. So when I look at like the range is like John to Bustamante, right?
Oh no, I'm thinking exactly this too.
And I'm friends with both of them.
Yeah, I know.
And I've had both of them on the show a bunch, but like. You know, one thing I do appreciate about Andy is like he lets me keep it real with him on camera and off camera, like since day one. And like if he's got a job to do, which I think he does his thing. I do mine.
It's not like he's like he's just contracting, right?
He's
like
just contracting.
Public diplomacy.
That's right. A little public diplomacy for the CIA.
Right.
They need that too.
That's right.
And then when he goes against a John, it doesn't go so well because people see through the arguments because that's why I really do believe, like part of the reason I really do believe John really is the dissident is because, listen, they talk about sheep dipping and putting people through shit.
Oh yeah, I got a story about that.
I want to hear your story about that in a second, but I will say this about John Kiriakou. People are always blown away by the level of shit they put him through based on what he can say publicly. If people knew the shit that he says privately about what they put him through, if he was sheep dipped, he's an alien, bro. Because I the first time I ever recorded with John, at the end, we recorded for 6 hours, did 2 episodes, 249 and 250. We had talked a bunch off camera as well. He had told us a bunch of the other things that he can't ever say publicly.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not saying he is or isn't. Yeah. I'm just throwing it out there.
I said to him, we talked for a half hour off camera, kind of wrapped all that stuff up at the end. And I said to him, John, I'm so happy you're finally doing pretty well and like living somewhat of a normal life and being able to tell your story and things like that because, I pride myself on being a very mentally strong individual. I'm not going to lie though, man. I don't know that I wouldn't have offed myself with the last, like I referred to the last thing he said that he can't say publicly. I'm like, that is so beyond the pale and so bad that if that had happened to me after all these other things that have happened to me, I might have given up. And I think if other people out there knew what it was, and I hate to be that guy not saying it,
even his public story, oh,
it's horrible.
They did him dirty.
They did him dirty as fuck.
That was bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but if they knew the real shit, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, that would be a next level commitment to roll if he's doing that, and he's also not exactly helping the quote unquote narratives, I guess, if you will. But you said you had a sheep dipping story.
Yeah. So look, take this for granted because. And kind of the anatomy of it too is sometimes you will have episodes that inextricably don't perform, and maybe they just sucked. Right? Let's put that out there.
Yeah.
Maybe they just sucked. Okay. So perfectly willing to admit that. But I interviewed a guy who was a PJ, right?
PJ.
So like special tactics, like the Air Force. Special forces,
okay,
not special, like special ops, not right. Special forces is very specific, Army, etc. But he's a special ops guy. They go in and they rescue, like part of the same sort of unit that they kind of rescued the pilots that were
right.
That's their exclusive mission. And you follow the love eggs, like UAPs, like
the Jake Barber stuff.
Yeah,
find the little eggy.
Yeah.
Not buying it.
I'm not buying it either, but here's why. So around the time that he claims to have gone to scuba school, right? There's this guy interviewed. His name's I want to say it's like Scott Pearson. I'm blanking right now, but it just didn't do that well because he talked about his special ops experience, and he like literally fell from an aircraft and his parachute didn't open. He had to recover from all that. But he also had an experience where he saw, something UAP in the sky. He's taken photos of it, published a book on it. And it looks kind of like a plasma sort of thing. But anyway, he was a scuba school instructor at the time Jake would have gone through. He's like, this guy, maybe I'm wrong, but this guy was not at scuba school at the time he was, and he was not in the pipeline because he would have known if he was in the pipeline. Yeah. So I'm not saying that's 100% chance that he was sheep dipped, but high probability.
That was also one of the fakest looking videos I've ever seen. Like I've seen some where I'm like, all right, maybe my mind's just telling me that's fake, but let me be open to it. That one, I looked at that. I mean, it looked like a fucking, what are those machines at the claw machine? Yeah, like it looked like a claw machine at like a fucking carnival.
Yeah, look, I could be completely wrong. Like there's none of this stuff is never 100%.
Yeah, it's never.
But I just kind of cut that off.
Yeah, we're just pure specking it.
Pure spec.
That's fine. That's fine.
But you have to decide, like some guests, I'm like, I don't know, like this guy's.
Right. That's always, I'm glad you said that because that's always been my theory. And I've talked about this a lot publicly. I'm like, I'd rather everyone out there get someone on camera for 3 hours where you at home can hear them talking rather than them sitting somewhere saying things and you wonder what they're saying and decide for yourself whether it's 80% bullshit or 100% bullshit and then why that might be. It's kind of like we get to be a lens into the audience. And like even Andy, like Andy says some things that are backed by evidence. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't want to hear that. That's fair. And then he'll say some other things and I'm like, that's straight out of Langley. Okay, discard that, keep that. And that's fine to me. Like that's part of the job. But I feel like if you just start bringing all these guys on and whatever, everything turns cloudy because you don't know.
Well, that's why you can't, like unless my personal bar for this is there's a difference between belief and knowledge. Knowledge you have to experience, right? Like you actually have to see it work from what you've been exposed to, right? Whereas, and the other thing too is there's like the government has been lying to us about so many different things that like the only reason I believe the Civil War happened is because I have like a great-great-grandfather's discharge papers, right? Right? Like I know what happened because I have these discharge papers at home from like, I don't have them. My father's got them. Right? Like you have to question everything. Yeah. Like everything's a freaking, like, 5 years ago, if somebody said like the Nazis won World War II, I'd be like, you're crazy. And now I'm like, I don't know.
It's fucking crazy, man.
I mean, probably not, but
You know what? And that's the thing about history, though, too. And this is something you always got to keep in mind. It's never going to be 100% of what's reported. History is always written by victors. I always use this example. I studied the shit out of the American Revolution. Those guys were amazing. They did a lot of great things. But like, there's some narratives in there where it's like they played dirty sometimes too, and sometimes that stuff gets reported and then it doesn't make it to the 3-hour documentary people watch. It's just a footnote.
Yeah, remember like somewhere. Benedict Arnold, right? This guy won victory after victory, and they didn't fucking pay him.
Not only that, they charged him.
Yeah, like
they charged him, and again, what he did is wrong.
Correct.
And I've studied Benedict Arnold like crazy. What he did is wrong. He's a traitor. That all bit is true, but like. He was a weaker man than a lot of the other guys for sure, and that's what did him in. The idea, though, that he just became a traitor and woke up one day and said, I think I'll go to the British. That is not what happened.
Yep.
And there were times where they could have had his back on certain things, including when he got shot in a battle and then got no credit for it. Like this is exactly it. So I'm all about, my whole thing is, because we can pull on strings and find out that certain things aren't true, it should not therefore make us become the why am I forgetting the word? Starts with a C. not counterpoint, but Jesus Christ, I'm like very hazy today. Sorry, people. But you shouldn't automatically assume the complete opposite.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Like
it's probably some like third way that, the way it happened.
Yes. Yeah. But like to your point, you can't just assume that like the narrative that built every decade is what it is. Like there's messaging that occurs in every country, including
I'll give you one. I'll give you one right now because this is so ubiquitous, and it's like that's not true. So people keep saying we never found weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We did.
Biological,
chemical.
Yeah,
2,400 sarin rockets, and there was an article. I have a friend who was an IED specialist who told me so that's why I believe it. But there was also an article in the New York Times called the like secret chemical weapons of Iraq or something like that reports all this stuff. And you can look it up. And I think it was like October 2014 or something like that. But you hear people saying routinely, again, they didn't have an active program, that's correct. But they had like stockpiles of this stuff still.
It's an important distinction because they are weapons of mass destruction. They're not nukes though. And that's what it was marketed as. They have nukes. But yeah, Danny Hall was in here for episodes 216, 217. He saw them personally.
Yeah.
He was a tip of spear guy. I've had a couple other people verify that off camera as well.
But if you listen to like NPR, like it's just like and the question is well, if he had them, why did the Bush administration not publicly kind of sing it from the rooftops? So again, pure spec, but my belief on this is if you find some stockpiles of, that's definitely the article. If you find stockpiles littered through Iraq, but you didn't find all the stockpiles, the last thing you want to do is say, hey, we found these random stockpiles like in Iraq because the enemy goes and finds them and then uses them. So that would be what I would speculate about.
What about once it becomes public, though? Now the enemy knows.
Yeah.
So how do you explain after that?
I don't know. I think a narrative just becomes so embedded among people that they just lock in and then refuse to broker any other explanation.
Right. And I don't want to understate the seriousness of someone like Saddam having weapons like that. It was a matter of what. This isn't the best way to put it, but it was sold as the Super Bowl and you were dealing with a Saturday college football game. I think that's part of the problem. Like they were like, he can end the world tomorrow with nukes. And it's like, that was not the case. So that could, I don't know, pure spec, that could also play a role. I think what you say has a ton of validity. Right. Another piece of it might be also like, we kind of oversold the fuck out of this. A lot of people died. The economy then crashed.
However, at least we tried to sell it.
And this time we didn't even try to sell it.
It was just like,
let's go.
Yeah. Our greatest ally says 2 weeks away, so we got to do it.
Fucking insane. And that's the thing, like since Joe Kent came out, follower of the show, by the way, but since he came out and said all this stuff, he's been so far very vindicated with the things he said. And one of I think one of the most important things he said right away when he first resigned was that, he said it very well. He was like, every country around the world is incentivized for their own interests. That's exactly how it should be. That's how we should be.
I don't have anything against Israel for pursuing their national vital interests. Like that's their national vital interests. Like they're just behaving the way a country should behave. However,
we accept it.
We're not.
Yeah.
We're behaving like a country that has a parasite on its back that's directing it into places that don't improve our vital national security interests. And frankly, we shouldn't be expending more treasure and lives in an area that
100%. 100%. And you're someone who's in the military who can speak to this first person with your friends and that whole era and everything. But like what he was saying is them acting in their own interests. One of the things they commonly do is share intelligence that's biased towards what they want with us.
Right.
And our people, as in our presidents, decide in some cases to believe their intelligence over our own that can directly contradict that. I'm not saying Mossad's not talented as hell. They are, but part of that talent is also fucking deception. Mm-hmm. They're spies. And like you need to have enough for all the shit we righteously give CIA and NSA and all these places for the many evil things they do. When it comes to like the basic national security things where some people there are actually doing their fucking job, you should trust your own people here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trust is a strong word. You should heed the advice of the intelligence backed by pure evidence that we get over other places.
Yeah, what did Reagan say? Trust but verify.
Exactly.
Right? I think if the Russians originally said it and he kind of just...
He took it, but that's okay. Yeah. That's ours now.
It's fine.
That's a part of the Cold War rules, man. You know? What's it? Stealing is the greatest creation? Something like that?
The greatest artist steals.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's all he was doing. It's okay. I got to piss real fast.
Yeah, I do too, actually.
We'll be right back. We got a lot to get into. You think there's anything to the whole Epstein got his Zorro ranch because it's dangerously close to Los Alamos and some research going on out there?
Yeah, to put yourself in kind of the intelligence community's purview, right? It's the end of the Cold War, and you have all these nuclear scientists that don't have a lot to do, right? And the Russians had the same problems, right, at the end of the Cold War, which is why, in fact, my thesis advisor was the Nunn-Lugar program, which he was part of, which was the...
Ash Carter?
Yeah. It was to decommission like Russian nukes. He's the reason that the Ukrainians didn't have nukes. That's the program that decommissioned it and to prevent kind of nuclear scientists from being hired away and working for these other governments. Like they had that. It's probably the same thing that they had, just on a smaller scale. Right? You don't want these people out there doing this stuff. What I want to know is how the Zorro Ranch won the lottery.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah,
It's the luckiest place in America.
That's right. Just, there's so many things that we think is fair and above board, and it's really not.
That was why Julia Mossbridge was mentioned in the files. She wasn't in them, but her name was mentioned in an email unbeknownst to her between Epstein and someone else, where the guy was joking about, to win the lottery, you'd have to be like Mossbridge and just be able to know the numbers ahead of time or something like that. I'm like, it's funny you say that now. Because what was it, like 32 million or some shit like that?
I can't remember. And
what was the number? Can we find that?
And how many times did he win it, too? It was at least once.
That we know of.
So I think, like everything else, they can back-rig this stuff. I'll give another example of that. So you're familiar with Tom Drake, because I think, I don't know if you've interviewed him.
NSA whistleblower.
Yeah, I don't think you've interviewed him yet, right?
No.
So this is where it gets weird. So Tom Drake, he was a senior NSA official, similar kind of, was a whistleblower in this mass collection state. There were like two different versions that they were going to go look at, and it was the one that they used was kind of the most illegal. Anyway, they threw the book at him too and went after him. But he was associated with and this is like, I'm not making this up, this is absolutely real, and I'll get to it will make sense, trust me, about things. I'm kind of weaving on kind of...
I trust you.
Okay. So he developed a friendship with this guy, Christopher Robinson, who's a precognitive dreamer. So this guy, and again, you do episodes with this guy, hardly gets any views. Whitley Strieber actually just interviewed him. They hardly get any views. It feels like there's like some likelihood he's algorithmically suppressed, but in Tom's capacity as an NSA, he worked with this guy because this guy would have precognitive dreams. He saw the Lockerbie bombing before it happened.
What bombing?
Lockerbie bombing, which was over the UK. It was...
was that the subway one in 2005?
No. It was an aircraft. Aircraft was bombed. So he saw it in a dream, and he had a prior relationship with Scotland Yard, MI5, MI6. So he had helped them foil IRA plots, all sorts of stuff from precognitive dreams. So he went to them and said, look, I know this is going to happen tomorrow. I want to put it in an affidavit. And they're like, are you sure you want to do that? You're going to get a lot of questions about, like, how would you know this? He's like, yes, I want to do this because I want to show, like, I want this documented that's absolutely real. And it happened the next day, pretty much as he described it. Anyway, he had he was tied in to Tom Drake for whatever reason, because of his intelligence value, et cetera. And to the point where, because it's transatlantic chatter, all of it's being monitored by the NSA. So when they were getting ready to prosecute Tom Drake, this guy Christopher Robinson has a precognitive dream, about that song, like 9 bottles of beer on the wall. And it was about 9 bottles of beer. And he's just like, you're gonna get 9 charges, but you're gonna beat every one. And sure enough, I'm sure like the FBI, NSA were listening to this conversation as they're investigating Tom Drake and ready to book him. And this precognitive dreamer from the UK tells him the stuff.
Wow.
So he saw this stuff. But the reason I'm talking about this is there are certain things about how things work that we think is fair and above board. The lottery is one of them, right?
Yeah, it was 85 million, by the way, not 32. Deef looked it up.
Oh, he's pretty lucky guy.
Yeah, very lucky.
So the first time I was interviewing this guy, or one of my interviews with Christopher Robinson, I'm going to get into kind of YouTube administrivia, but you'll know what I'm talking about. You know, the engagement graph kind of comes down and goes down like this. So I first interview him, and the engagement graph has its normal kind of slope. It's down about 33%. It spikes to 98%. Spikes down for like a 5-second segment. And then continues on its way. I'm like, what? Have you
What
ever
was the 5-second segment?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So have you ever seen that?
Yes.
And you go back to the segments and see what they were talking about?
Sometimes. Other times there's so many videos. It's like.
So he was just going through working for the UK and kind of their MI5, MI6, stuff like that. And he was just saying something, yeah, they can do a lot of things. They can do this and that. And then he says, or they can vote on behalf of somebody else and blah, blah, blah. When he said vote on behalf of somebody else, that thing spiked. I didn't even notice it during the interview at all. And I'm like, okay, well.
That's an interesting thing to say.
The thing is, like, we're not all morons. Like, we notice things. So what's my theory behind that? Well, maybe somebody saw that and like, oh my God, and sent it to 1 billion people and like, but no, I don't get that many views, right? I think there are systematic programs and filters that governments are running, and they see or hear something, and then a bunch of people look at it. All right, well, is this
100%
leak here? Do we have whatever? So anyway, that is the point of that story, is that there are many things in our civilization that we think are fair and above board. I'm not saying that's the way it is in the United States, but they did find that there was, 1.5 million people on the voter rolls that were registered by one signature, the same signature, just recently.
Things are weird. Things are definitely weird. And I think that if there's one good thing, and that's a really dangerous term to use with this, but if there's one good thing to come from this whole, like, release of the Epstein scandal, is that there are now more people looking at things going, oh, shit's crazy. There's some crazy motherfuckers that operate on a whole different wavelength. And even if you don't know the full scope of it or are not extremely well read on the case, you at least know that at this point. And it's like a thing where people on the left and right agree about this aspect of it. Like, wait a minute. Some class warfare going on here in a very interesting way. It could be a very unifying moment in the long run if we do this right as a group of people. I kind of don't think we're going to, but I hope we do. And I think you should question things for sure.
Yeah, it's divide and conquer narratives, right?
Yeah.
Like, where people should be looking is not class warfare, not at each other, not left or right. They should be looking at the massive people and the elites.
100%. Look up.
Look up.
Yeah.
And
what was the tagline of that 2019 movie? Don't look up.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. What was it? The revelation of the method?
Something like that.
That's like Kurt's always talking about, throwing out there.
Something. I mean, he throws a lot of things out there.
Yeah,
you're trying to hit a curveball while hitting a slider while running the second base at the same time, and it does not go well.
Yeah, interviewing him is like riding a Bronco.
There's no interviewing him. I mean, it's like
you got a tiger's tail and
first of all, you walk in here high as a kite because he smokes up the kitchen for like fucking a half hour before you walk in. Secondly, he's the master, and like somehow it works. He's the master of starting. He never saw a sentence that he started that he couldn't shift halfway through before finishing.
Oh, you didn't know that?
Yeah. Oh no. I know it very well.
You know that? He says that constantly. You didn't know that?
Oh yeah. When he goes, oh, you didn't know that? Yeah. Nah, he's something else, man. It's like almost those are podcasts I have to listen back to again to like fully appreciate it. Because in the moment you're just like playing that Jedi trick, like trying to just catch all the fucking ethersphere thrown around. Great experience though.
Yeah, it's bobbing and weaving. You know,
That's right.
You got to be on balls of your feet, otherwise.
That's right.
Who knows where he's going to take you? He's going to take you somewhere. You just want to like divert, deflect into a direction that
And he'll readjust too. Like when he was going at Sonny Hostin, and then we pulled up the article. I'm like, I think that was Hannah Cabrera. He goes, "Oh, I apologize, Sonny Hostin. Yeah, look, this you of traction." It's like you just destroyed it for like 5 minutes.
And then I think he came back. He's like, "But she's still blah, blah, blah."
Oh my God. I was in pain. Yeah, that was one episode that got age restricted where I didn't argue with YouTube when they did that.
I almost spit out my coffee.
Yeah, I was like, you know what?
You got me.
That's fair.
There's
no arguments here. I appealed it. They immediately denied it. I did not take it farther than that. Whereas every other video that's ever been age restricted or frankly even demonetized before, I'm like, the reasons you gave are wrong. But
yeah, you gotta like when he starts talking PDF files, you gotta be like, it's reining in, guys, reining in.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing. We were pulling things up on the screen because he constantly had us doing that, and there were some things I'm like, I would have. Yeah, on second thought, I should have told Deep maybe leave that one off camera.
The thing is, though, he'll say crazy shit, and then you'll pull it up, and you'll be like,
no, it's real.
Oh, yeah, that's a real thing.
Wow, that's not AI. He's like, it's not fucking AI, bro. Look at it. Those lips are real. What do you think of the whole disclosure thing they're doing though now? I love that reaction already, but please continue.
I haven't been following this for that long, but there are people who've been following this for 50 years, and it's like the same thing. It's just like, let's release enough information so that the people on the inside don't feel like they're holding all this in, and they feel validated and this and that, so they don't come out and disclose themselves. So actually, this will actually be a good time to talk about this. So you're familiar with the Scole Foundation?
Yes. Who was talking about this recently? Damn it. Can't remember, but go ahead, please.
So, and you should be able to find this on the internet because somebody leaked it. There was a guy named Colonel Nell, right, who was an Army intelligence officer, and during the first Soul Symposium that they had, he showed up. He posted a campaign plan, right, which was like, here are the wickets for certain things, areas of disclosure. It was like out until like 2030 and beyond. And I can't remember exactly what it said, but it should be out on Twitter somewhere because somebody took a picture of it, even though they said, don't release it, don't do this. And of course, my view was that was all orchestrated, right? It wasn't that somebody just didn't follow the rules, because I was mad. I was just like, this, like some like dipshit did this, and like, you're here as a, out of the grace of this organization. But I think it was staged. I think it was just like, let's like fake like it's a release, but it's a real release. Yeah. So that's out there. There's actually this kind of disclosure plan. I don't know whether it's real. I don't know if it's a psyop, but there are also things about, they're very concerned with catastrophic disclosure, right? They want controlled disclosure where they can kind of drip out this stuff in a way that doesn't cause, they keep talking about ontological shock, this and that. I think what they have more things to worry about is how much they've lied to people about what the fundamental nature of reality is. And it could be that, again, this is all pure spec, okay? Pure spec. Imagine if this, you talked about quantum mechanics at the very beginning, where people can manifest their own realities, but it's part of this consensus system, right? So you have people at the top that are trying to rigidly confine this consensus reality so it doesn't just go buck wild.
Right.
And I think there may be some worry that if this is the way that, again, pure spec, this is the way reality works, in order to constrain it and keep things from, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Like they were even talking about that stuff back in the 1980s, right? Right? Was that just like something to put out there and some weird, he's looking at Zener cards and stuff like that. And do you remember that with Bill Murray, where they're sitting there with Zener cards, those little cards where they
Zener cards?
They're called Zener cards. And they're just, there's like 5 of them. There might be like a star, like a circle. And then, you know, someone's looking at them and across the table, a person's supposed to read your mind or whatever and tell you what the card is. There's a scene where Bill Murray's there with like this guy and this like hot chick. And the guy's like getting him right. He's like, nope, wrong. Nope, wrong. Nope, wrong. And then the chick's getting him completely wrong. He's like, oh my God, you got it right again. Right? There's a whole scene like that. But there may be some effort to suppress that so that things don't, again, I'm not saying that's what it is, but that's one possibility. It could also be that Charles Fort, who was a guy way back in kind of the early, kind of late 1800s, 1900s, could be Earth is a farm.
A farm?
A farm.
What do you mean?
Like a farm. Like we're a product by some non-human species that we don't see that operates in the shadows.
Meaning we are actually free will individuals that are tinkered and fucked with in a way that we don't realize, or we are literally simulated like a video game?
The first one. So we're a product. We're a genetically engineered product, and you know, whatever we're doing somehow, again, that's probably oversimplifying it. And again, it's pure spec.
No, that's what he said. The Earth is, Charles Fort, the Earth is a farm. We are someone else's property. What was he basing that on? Like just how he thought about it?
Just similar things that like Keel was seeing, John Keel, Jacques Vallée.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. We go back, I talked earlier about Nathaniel Gillis. There are a lot of UFO encounters where there'll be multiple people. One person will see a UFO, another person will see an angel, right? So it could be that there's some non-human species that just co-creates with you in a sense, just taps into your mental model and will present something to you that you expect to see, which is why throughout history, right, it was only kind of until kind of the late 1800s that people started seeing quote unquote like spaceships and aliens and stuff like that. Before then you had like Ezekiel with his like angels and demons, and you know, in between you had with like John D. Enochian intelligences and you know, the Fae, right? But the jinn, right? But if you just ignore all that, the labels, the descriptions about how they operate and what they do are remarkably similar across the ages. It's almost like whatever this intelligence is that hacks into us is using our own imagination to manifest, right? And again, this is kind of what Nathaniel Gillis talks a lot about.
That's fascinating.
So that's why, like throughout history, you see as we evolve with the times, so does this intelligence or the phenomena, right, is what people would call it. So I don't know.
Where do you think AI fits into that? Do you think that's like a tool that was in this scenario, because it's just a scenario? Do you think that would have been like a tool thrown into the animal farm for us, or one that that like watching ants put together a new fort, if you will, that they expected us to make on our own and see what we did with it?
So I think it's both.
It's both.
So if you talk to a lot of inventors, things like that, a lot of times you'll ask them, like, how did you come up with this? And they'll be like, I just had a dream. There was actually, like, you know, Prince, the artist, was like just kind of batshit crazy, right? Well, he would have an idea for a song, and he would wake up like everybody on what is it, the New Revolution or whatever the fuck, I don't know what they're called, but he would wake up everybody and said, like, we have to record this right now.
Right now, yeah.
Otherwise, Michael Jackson will get it. But there might be some, you know, an element of truth to that, right? Because these ideas tend to come at just the right moment, or it appears to be just the right moment in history. Sometimes they're too early, sometimes they're too late. Remember the Newton, right?
The Newton?
Yeah. So,
like the apple in the tree shit?
Yeah, Apple. Yeah. So Apple came up with the Newton. It was like a proto iPhone.
Oh, no, different Apple.
Yeah, it was like a proto iPhone, but it just flopped. It didn't.
Oh yeah, was this right before Steve Jobs came back? It's been a while since I read the biography.
Yeah, I can't remember if he if it was before he came back or after he came back, but whatever it was, Apple put this thing out and it just didn't.
Yeah, it didn't work.
It didn't take off.
Ahead of its time. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, when I say there's a little bit of both, I think that's the kind of the inspiration part, that there's something that might be seeding these ideas in a way that's kind of outside the transceiver, right? And call it the metaphysical cloud. It's not a real thing. I'm just pure spec. But I think also, though, like we're the ones that are developing these things. Now, did we get the idea from something that crashed somewhere, like in Roswell, right? Which is another weird thing. You know that crash, at the time that crash happened, all 5 nuclear weapons in the world were in that spot, in the 509th.
Really?
Bombing. Yeah. Every nuclear weapon in the world.
You know what? I feel like James Fox might have told me that. That's crazy, though.
That's interesting, right?
Yes.
So, and then, I mean, we didn't even go into this, but there's also if you talk to Dr. Michael Masters, he's got the whole
He's been here.
Yeah, time travel. Yeah, so you know about the time travel element. And again, it could be all the above. It could be a simulation. I don't know. Like I said, I hate the simulation hypothesis, but it's the one that easily explains everything if you kind of force somebody to use it. But hopefully it's something broader than that. Hopefully we're not on a farm, but it feels that way.
Yeah, I want to table for 1 sec the whole distraction element here based on the timing of what they're currently saying, because that's where my head goes to with all this. But if you look at the actual rollout or idea of a rollout over time, everyone always talks about what you referenced a few minutes ago with the ontological shock and the things like that. And there's a couple things here. I saw a clip of Tim Dillon on Twitter on a recent episode talking about this, and he's fucking awesome, and he's talking about the distraction angle, which is extremely relevant. But then he went beyond that, and he's like, if you told everyone that fucking aliens existed tomorrow, no one would give a shit. They'd go about their day. That I would disagree with him on. If there were, depending on what the level of proof was.
It depends. It depends on what the evidence is.
Yeah, right. Because I've always thought about the whole idea that they can simulate social reactions to an impetus that they put out behind the scenes using the tools that they have to be able to know, if we told 8 billion people this with this input and this piece of evidence and this thing based on all of the behaviors we can track across the populace online, across these different groups, different religions, non-religions, whatever, ethnicities, this is overall what we could be looking at. Yeah, I could see, and I don't know this, but I could see a scenario where that creates some sort of existential shock depending on what the information is. If the information comes out and says like, hey, like elements of the Quran, the Bible, and the fucking Torah are all right, and there's aliens involved with it, maybe that's like a scenario where people are like, okay, enough people are like, I don't know about all of it, but we're okay. Whereas if they come out and they do the opposite and they say, everything you ever read, bullshit, here's how it really happened. There's a potential meaning of life crisis there, is there not?
Yeah. So let's pure spec, different scenarios, okay? So one of the things that has been creeping in about Roswell or various other kind of crashes, right, is that sometimes they find human body parts in these crashes.
Uh-huh.
There's also, and again, it's been widely suppressed, but you've heard of these cattle mutilations sort of things?
Yes.
There's also a corpus of information about human mutilations with similar, eyes burn out, like colon extracted, all that kind of stuff, that you never hear these people talk about because they're pretty dark.
Mm.
So there is an aspect to that, to all this. And how do you explain that, right? And like, I'm not even saying it's non-human intelligence. This could just be some rogue intelligence operation or whatever. I don't think it is, but something like that could be, like, the whole picture is going to be unsettling, okay? There could be something that I think would be far darker, which is, yes, you're a created species, you're a farm, and life ends at death. Like, you don't pass on. It's just nothing. That, I think, would have the highest level of ontological shock.
Yes.
Because at that point, it's just like, well, what is none of this matters, right? And it could also be that some of this is destabilizing enough that whatever the news is, positive or negative, it could disincent people to work anymore and cause a civilizational collapse, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what that would be, but I could probably make up a few things that would fit that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't think it's that bad. I think part of it is just there are probably technologies that have been withheld from us deliberately because if they were released, it probably would have caused civilizational collapse as well as environmental collapse. Let me give you an example.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So you have kind of the oil and gas industry, which strangely enough, like these oil and gas companies are very interested in crash retrievals and things like that. So imagine it has an energy source that taps 0-point energy, and effectively you have infinite energy all the time. So, okay, well, you wouldn't need all these oil companies. So overnight on the American stock market, every oil company with a market cap instantly goes to zero. Okay, wipes out pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, or just and has a ripple effect, right? Because then all those people don't have jobs, and about a third of every dollar in every product has petroleum. You're still going to need petroleum for certain things, right? Not to mention, let's say I'm a forester in the Amazon. Well, I mean, I can cut down as many trees as I want. I can keep this thing running all day long, 365 days a year. Next thing you know, you've deforested the Amazon in like 2 years. And then also, if you can extract energy from the vacuum, you can also use it as a weapon. Like every person would have access to, an earth-destroying weapon if they just used enough AI to figure out how to tweak it. So how do you roll that out, and how do you kind of keep it? The counter argument to that is, well, we were able to do this with nuclear just fine. But
that's not at everyone's fingertips.
Right. Well, maybe there's a way that they can do it so that it's not everybody's fingertips. But maybe it's the nature of this thing that's pulling stuff from the vacuum that, it will be at everybody's fingertips.
Yeah, it's not a perfectly parallel type thing, but it's a similar vein. It's reminding me of like some of the ideas Bostrom posited in Superintelligence, if you ever read that book.
I have not, but I've heard you talking about it.
Yeah,
Say
which
more.
Is like the infinite possibilities of where things could exponentially go wrong if certain inputs were put into a hypothetical AI scenario. It gets weird, but same kind of thing, to where if the expectations change because now you have access to a shiny new tool, it seems like, hey, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it. Everyone else won't, but then everyone else does, and then you do something like deforest the whole Amazon and take away 20% of the fucking Earth's oxygen overnight. Like, yeah, that's a problem. You're not going to fix that. That's irreversible. It's scary. And yeah, it could certainly tie into all the disclosure, for sure. And that could be a reason that they're holding things back. But then you also have the whole concept of like the alleged Collins elite and the guys like in the Pentagon who are like, this is angels and demons. You know what I mean? We can't fucking let this out. It's not perfectly that, but it becomes a religious type thing. And you wonder how much of that is just how much they're interpreting the Bible themselves to mean what they want it to mean versus maybe it does and they have evidence to prove it.
So that's one area where I feel like there's definitely an active narrative control. Okay. I don't think there's anybody in the Pentagon who's just like, Jesus said they're demons, and we're not gonna look at demons. We're not gonna talk about demons. We're not gonna do anything with demons, right?
No one, not one person.
The people who are working on the problem, I doubt it. They might have it in the back of my understanding of the Collins elite is that, and this is where you should have Nathaniel Gillis on, because there's a guy named Ray Boucher who's the pastor that this group allegedly approached.
Okay.
And what was happening was there was a project, and it's hard to find any information on this. I think there's like one book out there about it. So you've heard of MK Ultra. There was also a CIA project called MKOFTEN. And in MKOFTEN, they went and they tried to weaponize the occult. Okay?
Weaponize that. That's great.
Yeah, it makes sense. You know, they went to look at like, you know, hoodoo and voodoo and all that stuff. And Sibylle, I think, was like a witch that they looked at. Anyway, they were looking at ways to weaponize that. So when you start going down this path, they probably talk to ritual magicians. So like the Crowleys of the world, Thelema, where they have rituals and they invoke entities and things like that. So allegedly, again, this is just if you believe Ray Boucher, and there's a book called Final Events by Nick Redfern that kind of goes into depth about this.
What was Ray Boucher's official position again?
He was just a pastor that this group, the Collins Elite, approached to talk about this. And apparently every time I've tried to, interview him, but every time he goes on an interview with this, right, he cancels and suddenly gets sick. So
seems like a real straight shooter.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, the viewpoint was that they were practicing these rituals and they kind of entrapped themselves in a sense where they couldn't control it anymore and it became a problem. But it wasn't like, they're demons or anything like that. It's just these intelligences that were invoking, summoning, or whatever. It's just some really dark stuff that we need to keep underground, otherwise it spreads. And I don't know what the mechanism for that would be, but there's a book called Skinwalkers from the Pentagon where, are you familiar with this one?
Sounds awesome.
Like George Knapp is one of the authors. So is this guy Colin Kelleher.
Okay.
And it's called Skinwalkers of the Pentagon. They actually, again, I'm just passing on information. Mm-hmm. They did a lot of experiments at the Skinwalker Ranch, right? James Lukatsky is also, I think. I don't know if he's one of the co-authors. He might be, might not be. But they actually modeled this poltergeist phenomenon called the hitchhiker effect. And they modeled it like you would model a virus, right? With a R naught, R sub-zero. It had like an R naught of 3 or something like that, like an infection rate. So if you interacted with somebody who had this hitchhiker effect, those people started having hitchhiker effects, poltergeist activity at their homes. It's in the book. You can kind of read through it.
That's not creepy at all. Yeah, Lukatsky, Kelleher, and Knapp. Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, an insider's account of the secret government UFO program from October 2021. Good ratings, yeah. 4.4, not bad. 3,000 reviews. Again,
there's like one full-born intelligence official there. Name. And there's another Colin Kelleher is closely associated with it. And then George Knapp, he does a lot of work with those guys.
Sure.
You want to make him squirm? Start asking about the Soviet UFO material that he smuggled in from from Russia at the end of the Cold War.
Have you ever talked to him?
No, those guys don't talk to me.
Yeah. So Nat won't talk to you.
I mean, I haven't reached out that much.
So he smuggled in material from this. What kind of material again?
UFO material, like their UFO files.
How did he do that?
Very carefully.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, but like, did he have a guy? Like, or did he walk in and say, I think I'll just take that right there? Like, what's the...
I don't know the details. The way he'd probably tell it is like, yeah, I just slipped it under the... I would imagine that there was a whole thing under the surface in order to do that. He's probably acting on behalf of a U.S. intelligence operation.
And he's the Bob Lazar guy, which makes you think. Georgie, baby, what are you up to? Okay, investigative journalist George Knapp obtained and, according to reports, smuggled classified Soviet-era documents regarding UAP/UFO investigations out of Russia in the early 1990s following the USSR collapse. These files, which he recently released, conveniently, outline extensive Soviet military Ministry of Defense investigations into UFOs, including reports of UAP engagements, tic-tac objects, and recovered materials. And then there's a video from News Nation that we can't play because we'll get copyrighted that apparently discusses this. I don't know if he's in it or not, but reports indicated that Soviet warplanes engaged with UAPs at least 45 times by 1993, with cases involving encounters with tic-tac-style objects, which could be DARPA. That would make sense. Material evidence. NAP reported that a Russian scientist discovered small, opaque, unknown spheres of various UFO landing sites, which were brought to the U.S. for analysis. Smuggling method. To avoid being charged with espionage, NAP hid the documents among his personal papers with the help of Russian military personnel who wanted the information to be shared. The Thread 3 document. NAP obtained a document outlining a secret Russian effort known as Thread 3, which was unknown to U.S. intelligence until he brought it out.
Yeah,
that's kind of wild.
There's no way they didn't know about it. Also, why did the Russians cooperate? Do the Russians want to see disinformation through that?
Well, I think there's 3 doors. Door A is exactly what you said. They're trying to sow disinformation to the United States, even as the USSR is collapsing. Door 2 is the USSR is collapsing, and the scientists are trying to get some goodwill with the United States, a little Operation Paperclip style, because they don't know what's coming next. And door 3 is, I don't know what the fuck door 3 is. I don't know why I said there were 3 doors. I kind of forget what the third door was.
Door 3 is, it was a U.S. military or U.S. intelligence operation.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting, though. And that's the thing in this space, and this is what I've run into. It is intertwined with government and intelligence officials. And there's been stuff that, including people I've talked to, where stuff is provably not real or a deflection from something else. Does that mean all of what they're saying is fake? No. I'm one of these guys that likes to judge on a case-by-case basis, but I've made a really conscious decision, over the past going on like 15 months or so to pretty much, with the exception of my friend Chris Ramsey, talk with physicists about the phenomenon, and then maybe someone like you who's tangentially looking at it and also has a similar view on it to me with like, what the fuck is going on here? That's kind of where I want to leave it, because like the whistleblower side of things and the information shared therein, a lot of questionable stuff, to say the least.
If you saw a whistleblower, they generally don't survive.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why? And it's not to be mean, but you have to ask those questions. All right, why did this guy walk out and walk right the fucking front of Congress and tell his whole story?
Yeah, why are like the people who are leading some of these things, they have entire careers as counterintelligence.
100%. Yeah.
Like you're not here you're not a public affairs guy. You're there to expose leaks. And what's the best way to expose leaks? You say something that's knowably false, and then somebody who worked on the program is like, hey, I worked on that program. Like, oh, gotcha.
And now you create noise, and it's bad noise, and people go, oh, God, this again?
That's part of it, too. They want to make it wacky. Make it wacky and make people,
taboo.
Which probably why they don't want to talk to me, right?
Yeah, that could be. And like, I kind of wonder this sometimes because, like Joe Rogan invented a whole space here effectively, and he was really getting big in 2015, 2016, and he exploded in 2017, 2018. Like he was the biggest guy in 2015, 2016, but explodes 2017, 2018.
Which is the year that the Tic Tac videos came out.
Exactly. 2017 is when the New York Times report. And you kind of wonder if they're like, okay, there's a guy here who's actually looking into this and is well read on the subject matter and wants to know what the truth is and whatever. So you know what? Maybe we can throw them 5% and tell them it's 100.
Yeah, there's a term for it. It's called a limited modified hangout.
100%. Right. And then it goes across the whole industry to guys like me, guys like Danny Jones. Like he and I talk about this all the time. Like some of these guys, man, and that's unfortunately like a part of it. Like you learn that along the way. And I never want to baby with the bathwater stuff. You know what I mean? I don't want to say because this guy was completely full of shit, therefore all of it is that way. But when it comes to like the one space of whistleblowers, the burden of proof is on them, you know?
Like they'll put out a lot of the stuff they put out. It's most effective if there's elements of truth in it.
Of course.
Right. But it'll be also elements of just complete and utter nonsense. And then they'll put out different stories to different people, right? Like maybe they did with Lazar, where they'll insert one detail and then they can track who the person who leaked it was.
Right.
Right. So there are lots of different techniques. But again, the limited modified hangout is you have a glacier under the water of things, and they'll just tell you the tippity top and then move on. Because there could be other random things too, like
look over here, don't look over here.
I mean, it could be maybe we have, again, I don't think it's this, but maybe we have like a treaty where we said, sure, okay, we surrender, and you can take, X number of hybrids, or not hybrids, but that's the latest thing. They're like, yeah, there's, I heard a story where there was some hybrids, and they're always putting this stuff. It's like
UFOs on the White House.
You're just going to throw that out there and then and not like follow up. Like there's so many questions.
Right.
So
I think if there were secrets hidden, it's not necessarily in any one time or place, but a place where it really would have had a great opportunity to happen, when you talk, pun intended, fog of war, would have been the World War II years. And it's fascinating that in those years, we got the nuke. And then also, since those years, immediately starting after, with things like Roswell and stuff like that, we see these patterns of odd sightings at military bases, specifically places where there are nukes. There might be a there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a reason these things are... I mean, it could be something like... Maybe these things are just plasma.
Maybe.
Like whatever, I forget what they're calling, sentient plasmoids, right? In fact, there's a call for papers at Harvard in September of 2024 about sentient plasmoids.
Sentient plasmoids, straight out of Harvard.
Yep. And, maybe these things get energy from, the movement of nuclear materials. Maybe, again, pure spec. Everything's pure spec. But there are, like, scientists will look at plasmas, and there could easily be life, only just happens much faster, right? I can't remember if there's I don't know where I saw the paper, but there are papers on this where you can have cells of plasma and they exchange information efficiently. They show behavior that appears to exhibit or seem like reproduction. They behave intelligently.
Jesus Christ.
So, and again, it's like 99% of visible matter is plasma, right? Now, there's invisible matter, which is kind of dark energy and dark matter and all that stuff, and I can't speak to that. But actually, there's this guy, Dr. James Madden. He's a philosopher, but he wrote a book called Unidentified, I can't remember the name of the book, but there's this concept called the Umwelt. Okay, the Umwelt is just the world around us, the way we see it, like our senses. And the example he uses about the Umwelt is he talks about it like ticks, the way ticks operate, right? Ticks don't see. What they do is they detect butyric acid, right? That's just a chemical sense. And they just kind of sit on a blade of grass and wait until they detect butyric acid, which is what mammals give off. As soon as it detects, it just falls from the blade of grass onto warmth. It looks as a temperature detector, right? It looks for a warm mammalian body. And then it uses touch to decide when to inject its proboscis or whatever and start draining. But that's its entire worldview, right? It doesn't see, it doesn't hear, but it's a fully functional Umwelt. The same thing is probably true of humans, right? We only see from the visible spectrum from like 400 to 700 nanometers. We only hear from 2,000 to 20,000 hertz, right? There's a whole level of reality that survival didn't need to select us for, that we're missing out on. There are other things that other species have that are far exceed our ability to detect. So the bottom line is, part of this is, and that's called, there's our Umwelt, and then there's this Uber Umwelt that is all of reality that we just don't see or detect. So a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, UAPs, might just be some facet of that. For instance, we're only capable of operating in 4 dimensions, right? You've heard about this book, Flatland, right? Where there's a book in like the late 1800s where it imagines a 2-dimensional, like a species that sees in 2 dimensions. And what would a 3-dimensional being look like, right? It would just be like if you have a finger, or if you have a ball, right? A sphere, and you passed a sphere through that world, you would just see a tiny circle expanding to a large circle
Yes.
and then declining to a point, right? And it would be like, what the hell was that? So it could just be that maybe there are higher physical dimensions. In string theory, they tell you there are, but who knows? That sounds like a big waste of time to me. That maybe we just don't. There are things that are higher dimensional beings and different than the dimensional we defined earlier as a type of reality. This might just be physical dimensions. And there might be time dimensions too, right? That might not just be a linear hour of time. There might be you can go left, right, down, up, down. Who knows? So part of it's just we have limited perception. It's very hard to conceive of these things. I mean, right now there's Wi-Fi signals booming all around us. We don't see those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, like, the people that even biologically can't conceive them like us, who at least are read in on the proof that it exists. It's like, what do you even do with that? But, I mean, we've been getting at it with the distraction element of it. You have to do this. It's like you have the Epstein files go fucking haywire. The first time around when they were forced to release it, they did it the Friday before Christmas. A week later, Nick Shirley puts out the fucking Somali fraud video that gets astroturfed into the ethersphere. And then a week after that, we invade Venezuela. Nobody's talking about Epstein. Mm-hmm. But then 4 weeks later, boom, the big Epstein one comes out January 30th. No one, righteously so, none of us can shut the fuck up about it, as we shouldn't, over the next month. And then we invade Iran. Then that turns into a disaster. The focus is shifted to that, so the people aren't talking about Epstein, but that's not enough. Now Iran's a disaster. It's a new fucking thing. And so wait a minute. Now we got missing scientists, and that's really interesting because it's been going on for 4 years, and they're all gone. And all the while, Trump's like, oh, by the way, a week before Iran, we're going to release the UFO files. Then they're late on that. Now they're back to talking about releasing all the UFO files and making a big deal out of it when he's never seemed to care about it before in the first place. So you have to wonder. Like,
they cleaned him up. Let's scrub this a little bit, and we'll just do another limited release, declare victory, so that's everything, even though it's not everything. I mean, I think they lost like 100 terabytes or something. Like the FBI lost like 100 terabytes of material from that.
Are you kidding me?
No, I just look it up. I can't remember where I read it.
How do you lose it?
Well, lose it.
Yeah.
Or some other actor maybe hacked in, or
they put it on Kash Patel's desk and somehow it's not there anymore. All right, based on reports from February 26, a massive archive of 3.8 million declassified U.S. government files, including extensive UFO, CIA, and historical records, was wiped clean from the Black Vault archive rather than the FBI's internal servers. The files were hosted on a private server by researcher John Greenwald, not on a government website. The data was wiped. Wait, the John Greenwald I know? Like the Black Vault guy?
Yeah, that sounds like the Black Vault guy.
Yeah, not on a government website. The data was wiped on February 20th with server permissions and ownership logs changed without explanation.
I didn't even know about this. I thought it was like the Epstein files had the...
Well, they did that too. That one got lost. But while not directly from the FBI's, the files were mostly acquired via the FOIA from agencies like FBI, CIA, and others. Okay, this one's interesting. It's at least acquired in a public way, but that's still really interesting. I didn't know about this. But yeah, you are right. They lost Epstein files in 2023. That's pre-Kash Patel, in fairness to him. But it's like the timing.
That's exactly what I was talking about earlier with Carl Nell. That's what they flashed up to the...
What'd they flash up?
This is the disclosure campaign plan.
Oh, the Soul Foundation?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Soul Foundation UAP disclosure campaign plan, phase 1, demonstrate UAP existence. That's pre-Jan 1, 2026. Phase 2, pre-Jan 1, 2028. Correlate UAP signatures. Phase 3, pre-1 October 2030. Characterize UAP performance. Phase 4, determine UAP nature prior to 1 October 2034. And then indefinite timeline, phase 5, NHI engagement. We're going to talk to the aliens. We'll do a podcast with them. How about that?
Right. Anytime they
Put
want
a
to come
fucking
on
alien right there.
Darkly or Julian Dorey.
Yeah, you can sit shotgun with me. We'll talk to the
welcome.
Gray.
Yeah, welcome. We can talk to him.
You're not an alien, are you?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah, we don't.
You never
we don't
know
even
who's coming in these studios.
Maybe some of us are Manchurian candidates. We don't even know.
That's right.
I was well, that's the other thing. Let's pure spec.
I love that he's using pure spec.
Let's say that there is a hybridization program. Okay.
Meaning humans are fucking aliens.
meaning humans have some alien DNA. But by the way, you should look into 23andMe because there always is some level of like indeterminate percentage of DNA in those reports. Now it could just be, not experimental, but it could just be some like factor that they just can't identify and they just lump in that category, or maybe it's something else. But let's just say, pure spec, that there is some hybridization in the population where they were seeded and people have different percentages of non-human DNA, okay? And let's say those people don't know that. They have no idea. What happens if you release the information that there are people in the population who have this DNA? They don't know it, but we're going to let people know who they are. What would happen to those people? Right? You don't think people would kind of come out and like, there are demons inside them. We got to burn them.
We're going to extract them.
Yeah, we got to burn them, right? Like there could be issues like that where, a lot of people just get murdered because of the fear of, it's not their fault, but I don't know anything anybody else does, right? It's just pure spec.
It's a fair possibility to posit. And again, is that a part of things that they know that they can't talk about because they know people would fucking lose their minds and do shit like The Purge?
Well, Pat Price in the 70s, he, I think Puthoff gave this guy... Hal Puthoff gave Daz Smith some of his remote viewing records. Like for some reason he had Pat Price stuff. And apparently Pat Price had, again, I'm just reporting this, had remote viewed people in key institutions. And basically they were not human. Right? So like...
That's reassuring.
He didn't do it by name, but it was just like this college, president of this college and, this particular area. So there might be the case where there's people who are just kind of running the scenes and have always been either in secret or are known. Again, this is pure spec. I'm not saying this is real.
Listen, I don't think Men in Black was completely a figment of imagination that went pen to paper onto a screenplay. I'm not saying it's all real. I'm saying like there's something there. It's based on something.
Have you talked to Peter Levenda?
Someone told me to talk to... Who was telling me to talk to Peter Levenda? Might have been James Fox. I haven't talked to him.
I mean,
or Julia. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely interesting. There is a... I think he's a great guy. I think he's brilliant. He's a brilliant researcher. There is some adjacency to kind of intelligence, national security, though, for sure.
What do you mean by that?
So he got into this whole topic because it was during the Vietnam War, and one of the exemptions to get out of the draft was basically to create like a 501c3 and start a religion. So they started like the American Orthodox Church or something crazy like that. And then using those credentials, they were somehow able to get into the Robert F. Kennedy funeral in New York. You'll have to ask Danny Jones. I think he explained it to Danny Jones.
Danny Jones, 371. I'm looking right now because I had a feeling Danny had him on.
So that caught the attention of intelligence folks, and then they would use him from time to time to... just seed information or just get information about how the Russians were using the Eastern Orthodox Church to smuggle in spies and stuff like that. So I'm not saying he's very interesting, and you just have to be, and don't mention like he also has an occult background too.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to make sure because I was put in the face with it, and it was the one I was thinking.
Like
of.
During our interview, I mentioned like the name of a demon. And he's just like, whoa,
chill with that, boy.
You can't. I'm like, am I gonna be okay?
You're gonna start summoning.
He's like, you'll probably be. Yeah, he's like, you'll be okay, probably.
Is the demon in the room with us right now?
No, I'll tell you afterward. I ain't gonna say it
Okay.
because he just had a weird reaction, and I'm like,
yeah, I don't know what to make of that sometimes, but it's fun to talk about. It's like, okay,
there's something to it. I just don't think it. I don't think it is what we think it is. I think it's. When we talked about these overlapping realities and things like that, it's probably some connection to that.
Right.
I'm sure science explains all of it. It's just the science that we currently have. We don't know as much as we think we know.
Can't get all the way there.
Yeah.
Now, we put a pin way earlier in the Heaven's Gate thing with remote viewing. So for people who are unfamiliar with that, can you explain what that is?
Okay, so let's start with the Heaven's Gate. So there was a cult back in kind of the early 90s, and it was run by this male and female pair, T and Doe, and they, would worship basically by watching Star Trek episodes. It's pretty kooky stuff. And they would, also like the males they basically tried to be gender neutral. So the males castrated themselves or were castrated, chemically castrated, whatever you want to call it. And they ultimately, there's this thing called the Hale-Bopp comet that flew toward the Earth. And they believed that there was a flying saucer in the corona of that comet that they had to discard their physical vehicles and to ascend to this craft. And I think at the time, one of the female person had died, and there's this one guy that was in charge. So anyway, as that comet was coming in, there's two remote viewers, right? So one of them was Ed Dames, who's recently passed. And for all he's done, like net positive impact on the world, we wouldn't know about remote viewing if he hadn't leaked it. He was part of the original Stargate program. I never got a chance to talk to him because he'd never agreed to interview. But when he was, they were going to release a book about remote viewing, and I think the person at St. Martin's Press kind of distributed it around to other people who were in the unit. And it had like some stuff that just clearly didn't happen. Like when he walked in the room, everybody would stand up and salute. And it was not that kind of an operation, right? Everybody was kind of in civilian clothes. And not all the time. But anyway, Morehouse looks at it and he's just like, this is like, you can't publish this because it's just going to come out and everybody's going to attack it. And it's not. So they basically then just asked him to write his own book. So that created a rift between him and Ed Dames for a while. But to this day, like Morehouse still thought the guy was a good guy and all that. And I'm saying this on purpose because what I'm about to explain is not going to put him in the best of lights. But this is, don't hate the person. People make mistakes in their life. But anyway, he was burned once with books. So then he starts co-writing a book with, now I'm blanking on his name, on another remote viewer. Okay. It's probably Courtney Brown, who runs the Farsight Institute. He took like one course with Ed Dames and then created his own version of remote viewing called Scientific Remote Viewing, SRV. And then when Ed Dames left, he had his own version called TRV, Technical Remote Viewing. It's all, I'm sure there's like little differences, but it's all CRV stuff. So they start co-writing a book, and Ed Dames could be, according to people I've talked to, could be a little overbearing and was kind of doing some of the same stuff. And Courtney Brown was just like, this is like, I can't put that in the book. And he's like, you have to. Otherwise, like, if I'm going to be in this book, he's like, I can just hit find, replace your name with remote viewer. And like, I could easily not include you in the book and be done. And that's basically what he did. Right. Ooh. So Ed Dames has been like twice, or at least from his perspective, likely, been spurned in this manner. So Art Bell everybody's talking Hale-Bopp. Everybody's talking Hale-Bopp, right? And he's having like Ed Dames on, then Courtney Brown, Ed Dames, Courtney Brown. They're talking about this comet coming in, okay, on Coast to Coast AM. Art Bell says, hey, when Courtney Brown's on, hey, I just got this like photo from an astronomer. And, here's Hale-Bopp and here's the corona of Hale-Bopp. Here's the tail. And there's like this little speck there. Can you remote view and see what that is? Right? So we talked about front loading. Mm-hmm. This is the ultimate front load. Mm. Okay? So Courtney Brown's like, yeah, sure, I'll take a look at it. And he comes back like very tentatively and like, yeah, it looks like it's, like a mothership. It's coming in. Like, I haven't really done too much with it, but, would you want me to do more? And then, Art Bell, being Art Bell, is like, yeah, absolutely. So then he gets into this whole elaborate story about this mothership coming in and all that stuff. And these Heaven's Gate people kind of latch onto that.
Oh, shit.
So eventually, like, somebody calls in and says, hey, I'm the radio astronomer. And that whole thing was photoshopped. It's bullshit. So allegedly, and I'm saying allegedly just to protect all of us, Ed Dames seeded that in there to humiliate Courtney Brown. And as a result, like, these guys, you know, I'm not saying that's the reason. They may have been like, you know, they were already, you know, 5 fries short of a Happy Meal to begin with.
Uh-huh.
But like, that stuff is, you know, there are real consequences to that stuff. And that's, again, it's front loading, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also not ended up, but it's one of those data points that serves to discredit remote viewing.
Yep.
And it simply was just not done the way it's supposed to be done.
You wonder if that's the point.
And maybe that was the point.
You wonder if that's like some sort of like plant. Yeah, you got Heaven's Gate up there. Yeah, Heaven's Gate religious group, American New Religious Movement, known primarily for the mass suicides of its members in 1997, often described as a cult. It was founded in 1974, led by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. Known within the movement as Doe and T, respectively, Nettles and Applewhite first met in 1972 and went on a journey of spiritual discovery, identifying themselves as the two witnesses of the Book of Revelation. That's never good. That's never good. That's straight out of the Joseph Smith textbook. Attracting a following of several hundred people in the mid-1970s. In 1976, a core group of a few dozen members stopped recruiting and instituted a monastic lifestyle. Scholars have described the theology of Heaven's Gate as a mixture of Christian millennialism, New Age, and ufology, and it has been characterized as a UFO religion. The central belief of the group was that followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature, and they would ascend to heaven, very clavicular of them, referred to as the next level or the evolutionary level above human. The death of Nettles from cancer in 1985 challenged the group's views on ascension. While they originally believed they would ascend to heaven while alive aboard a UFO, they came to believe that the body was merely a container, very Scientology of them, or vehicle for the soul, and that their consciousness would be transferred to next-level bodies upon death. On March 26, 1997, deputies of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department discovered the bodies of 39 active members of the group, including Applewhite, in a house in San Diego County suburb of Rancho Santa Fe. They had participated in a coordinated series of ritual suicides, coinciding with the largest approach of Comet Hale-Bopp. Just before the mass suicide, the group's website was updated with the message, Hale-Bopp brings closure to Heaven's Gate. Our 22 years of classroom here on planet Earth is finally coming to conclusion. Graduation from the human evolutionary level. We are happily prepared to leave this world and go with T's crew. Jesus Christ. Ooh.
And by the way, Courtney Brown is a very talented remote viewer. He just didn't follow the core.
Didn't follow the protocols.
Yeah, you're not supposed to know what you're viewing. Otherwise, your imagination's going to fill in the details. Or you can't, like, prevent it.
Well, that's one way it can turn out.
Lil Uzi based his
Yeah, Lil
album
Uzi
off
Vert. That's right.
Based it off Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
Wait, what's that?
Lil Uzi Vertical based,
Rapper. That was his album cover.
Philly guy.
Interesting. Is that? I think it looks like an ankh too. It's like
A what?
an ankh.
An unk or an
ankh? A-N-K-H.
It's an important distinction there.
I think it's like an Egyptian symbol.
Oh, that's good. I feel like that would start a fucking 6-hour rabbit hole. Yeah. Sean, I gotta get you to your fucking plane, but this has been wild, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out here to do it.
Had a good time. I hope I didn't scare anybody.
No. The last part's unfortunate, but, it's a true story, so lesson learned for all of us out there. Don't follow Heaven's Gate. But I really appreciate your wide scope of knowledge on things, and I'm also looking forward to you sitting down with my friend Mark Gagnon. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And man, it was an absolute pleasure. I enjoyed it.
All right, everyone go subscribe to Sean's channel. We will have that linked down below if you want to hear more stories just like you did right here, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. What's up, guys? Thanks so much for watching the video. If you have not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button before you leave, as well as leaving a like on the video. It's a huge, huge help. You can join my Patreon via the link in the description, and you can also join my clipping community via the Discord link down below. See you for the next episode.